So I suppose the first question is, who is David Bond?
David Bond is, in my mind, just a all-American regular guy. In a lot of people's mind, he's somewhat eccentric. I don't see that, but I'm a guy that's been a traditional sign writer for 33 years now.
Wow.
Now in Texas. Grew up in the Central Coast of California. I guess that's me. I mean, I have a foot in a bunch of worlds. I work pretty heavily in the Western world, in the traditional Western world. But I also am the artist for the Born Free Motorcycle Show, which is giant now. So I have a foot in motorcycles, a foot in cars, a foot in, cowboy, which is very normal to me, especially being from California, where you have so many influences. When you get out here to Texas, it's not very normal.
Right.
There's people are more zeroed in on what they're into and what they've done their entire life. And, as a kid, I grew up on a cattle ranch, got into skateboarding and punk rock and, lowriders and cars and bikes and all of that stuff, still working cattle.
Yeah.
Still working cattle at the same time.
And it's just, I used to think it was very odd, like, wow, what a weird guy, like that's such a weird group of influences, but all of us are that way from there, I mean, it's just a broad horizon. Some of my best friends were like Mexican lowrider guys that I grew up with, and I mean, their dads would work the ranches and that kind of stuff, so it was just, it kind of goes hand in hand. You come back here and it's different, I can't tell you how many times people have met me and immediately, like in the Western world, like, and it's the hair. It's solely having long hair. That's it. And once they get past that, everything's good, and I oftentimes have to remind people that, open a history book. What did the Cowboys look like? So
Yeah. So how did you end up going from work? Was it your family's business that was ranching, or did you just happen to pick up jobs on ranches?
No, family. Lucky Bee. The Lucky Bee brand that I use for my company is our cattle brand.
Right.
And it just grew up around that. That was my influence. We were rural. We weren't like, in Texas standards, a medium-sized ranch is 16,000 to 200,000 acres.
Wow.
Wow.
If you go to where we were from, we didn't have that. We had a 100 acres, 101 acres, I think, when we finally sold the ranch last year. That ranch had started at 321 acres, and it's just what I grew up around. My parents were, my dad was a fish and game warden.
Okay.
But he was also ran cattle. My mom was super handy. She grew gardens, and, when we were very young, we were totally self-sufficient. We had a 2-acre garden when I was a kid, and my mom would can and put up all that canning, and we would have just a big garage-sized room full of canning, and we'd run and raise and butcher cattle and pigs and, chickens and ducks and eggs and all that stuff. So it was a very rural existence when I was a kid. And, you made your own sort of fun when you weren't working, which was horses or motorcycles, which I got into very early. I think my dad got me an XR75? No, that was my second bike. Got one of those little Honda 50s.
Like a little PV50 kind of turn and go job,
Yeah. Well, no, it was even prior to that. It was the one with the adjustable bars that would swing in. I mean, I'm quite a bit older than you. So it was like a 70s. little 50. Anyhow, but that's, and growing up rural, I mean, we would, summer days, we would get kicked out of the house and mom would say, be home for dinner kind of thing. And you'd ride 70 miles with some buddies to a pond to fish and do whatever you were doing. And
Sounds fun.
it's such a different world now,
Yeah.
That sounds like the dream, doesn't it?
That's your, yeah, it sounds like
That
your
is
dream.
my dream. Like that is
Yeah.
the absolute dream.
Yeah.
So how did you transit? When did the painting and the artistry work and the sort of graphic design work start?
The artist work was born with me.
Right.
I was in trouble my entire life in school for doodling, talking, everything but doing my schoolwork, which I have theories on now. But at the time, they just said he's hyperactive or he's,
A bad behaved kid.
bad behaved kid,
Yeah.
right? Which now I really think they maybe need to identify that and teach those kids differently,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? Because we're artistic, different side of the brain.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
But I didn't take art school or anything growing up at all.
Right.
My parents furnished me with whatever. We had art supplies and everything, and my brother wasn't artistic at all. But I just worked with it. I mean, it was always my go-to. That was my thing. I mean, it was just my extension of me. So when I got into high school, I took a couple of art classes at the very end, which was like the coach was like the art teacher, which was just terrible. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that either. But then I went to college. I went to college on the junior JC level.
Right.
And I was pursuing art history for a living. Like I was going to teach at the college level, teach
Okay.
art history. And I guess I struggled a little bit with that too because my retention span. I wish I was a better reader, and I toil over that because I can literally read a page and not retain what I just read because I'm thinking about a million other things, right?
Yeah.
So I had studied really hard to get into school at UC Davis. I wanted to study under Wayne Thiebaud, who was one of my favorite, like San Francisco, kind of pop artist, but realist. He's somewhere in the middle of all that kind of thing. And he was the instructor at UC Davis. So I got in, and finally, after all this hard work, got in, and only to find out that he had quit. Oh. He had a problem with the school, and threw his hands up and quit. And so I had been going back and forth in a 73 Chevrolet truck that got 6 miles to the gallon.
Nice.
And I needed gas money, and I probably should back up though. My parents, to their credit, being rural, being cattle ranchers, being law enforcement, everything that was going on, by most standards, would have put their foot down and said, "You can't be an artist. You have to go do something else." But my parents were like, "Clearly, you're an artist. This has been you your whole life."
That's really nice.
That's really nice to
It's
hear.
incredible. And they said, if you're going to make a living as an artist, go and do the absolute best that you can do.
What
And
great advice.
That gave me this incredible confidence because my parents supported me.
Yeah.
So I went forth and, went to go to school. Also, like an artist, when the instructor that I wanted to study under quit, so did I. I'm like, well, that's what I was coming for. So I bailed out.
So you weren't going for the school, you were going to study
I was
under
going
him.
to study under Wayne Thiebaud.
So that made no sense to you at that time to continue with that school.
No. And that it presented a why in the road. And the why in the road was just before quitting, I needed gas money. Just to survive as a young college kid. And so my buddy said, "Hey, I got a sign job that, I work at the sign shop, and we could hire you as a paid apprentice, and you could come in and basically cut boards and prime boards and do that sort of thing. All the background work for the sign painters. So I did and went there and worked and started to learn. And that was that why in the road. Like, I never had thought, oh, I'll be a sign writer. It never even occurred to me.
Yeah.
But then at that point, I remember as a kid watching sign painters paint windows and gild glass. Like, whenever I would see that, I would be mesmerized. Like,
Yeah.
whoa,
Yeah.
what are they doing?
I can go on a real deep rabbit hole on YouTube watching sign writers. There's
Right.
a lot of things, like a lot of Japanese craftsmen as well, but you just don't see sign writing much like that anymore. With a little
No.
bit of a resurgence back home, but
No.
for a long time you just did not see
Well,
it.
and there is a bit of a resurgence now. I hope I answered that whole question.
Yeah, massively.
But there is a bit of a resurgence over the last maybe 10 years with some really talented people. You know, it's like everybody wants to be a pinstriper or everyone wants to be this or that, but there's a few that make it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, you can look at terrible work. I feel super bad because I'm not judgmental. I'm super supportive of whoever.
Yeah.
You know, people will ask me questions and I don't harbor a lot of secrets because I feel it's really important to pass that forward.
Love it.
But I do have a couple secrets I'm not going to give away. But it's like that's really good. But then there's got, you know, some of the work is just like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, that'll fall through the cracks at some point, you know, but there are some, I have friends in Japan that are incredible sign guys, like, and they're very good friends and we talk super often, you know, and Japan's wild, you know, I've been, I think 6 times to Japan.
It's on my list, my bucket list.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And the thing about Japan is everything is art.
Mm-hmm.
The manhole cover on the street is art.
Yeah.
The doorknob or the way they re-engineer everything, right? So like you'll go into a building over there that's an office building or whatnot, or a coffee shop or something, and it'll be press board, you know, what we call press board, which all the chipboard.
Yeah.
They use that as a finished product on the walls.
Yeah.
They'll stain it, you know, and they'll use plywood, 3/4 inch plywood. Sorry, I'm talking inches because
That's fine. Yeah.
and they'll frame outdoors with them. You know, this is all like what we bury,
Yeah.
right? That's put behind something. They bring it forward, and it's wild. And they've done that on every single level. They've done it in the car and bike world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's my phone. I'm sorry. I thought, why is my little deal buzzing? Oh, that's Colt right there.
You can take it. Yeah, of course you can.
Hey, Colt.
Oh, good question. I got too excited about Colt.
I think we were talking about Japan.
Yeah,
we're-
sorry, Japan. So like everything's artwork.
Well, yeah, you know, I'll speak for Americans. Whether you're building traditional hot rods or customs or street rods or choppers or dirt bikes or, you know, desert racers or whatnot, we had reached this point where everything had been done, right? And you have this brilliant idea when you're sitting in your shop by yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, this will blow minds. And then somebody's like, oh yeah, that guy did it in 68.
Yeah.
You know, so there's really no new ideas. But the Japanese approached it and we're governed by so many parameters. Like I can't build a 60s custom bike, or better yet, I can't build a 20s Model A Ford with 60s lowrider panels on it with this style and this style and this side. The Japanese threw everything into the bucket, shook it up, and then the stuff that came out blew everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Because they pushed it forward by utilizing everything.
Yep.
And it's insane. And I mean, there's such a reverent country. Everybody's so nice. I mean, I've heard that, like the cocktail waitress probably hates you, but she's the nicest person in the world, and so everybody's so reverent and so amazing to you. And then their culture just fully supports the arts.
Yeah. What I love about it is everything's an A surface. Everything's an A-star surface. There's no hiding behind it. Even, and again, we've not been, so I'm only talking third hand through what I've seen in documentaries I've watched, but everything's on show. If you go into someone's shop, they're making it in the back.
Sure.
There's no detach from that. And they're like, well, we make it well enough that you can see that. You look at like the high-end sushi chefs, they're making it in front of you. They're like, we do this at such a high level of art form. Why would we hide it?
Well, it's interesting. This will sound kind of crass, but it's after World War II, when the war was shut down, and we shut them down, right? After they came out of that, they literally told, the leaders literally told the people, we're going to rebuild Japan, and we're going to rebuild Japan in this fashion. And it doesn't matter what you do, it's all approached as a master's level. So like, like you become almost like the ninja was learned through a lifetime, and then you became this ninja. If you're a bike builder, you're totally looked down on by all the Japanese, like families are embarrassed. But if you're a builder, you're this master builder.
Yeah.
If you're an artist, you're this master artist. And I think they stand behind the people. I think they'll put them through, kind of put them on the dole or something so they can go through and learn their craft and then come out as this high-end master. I mean, there's nobody really towing the line.
Yeah, there's nobody doing subpar work.
Like here in America, everyone just toes the line, I think when you get into what you're talking about and the people that you're talking to, we're the people that aren't content to toe the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As we often refer to it as a different breed of people, don't we? It's people that, it's not that they don't want to work the 9 to 5, it's that they couldn't. They wouldn't be happy with what they're doing. You just couldn't do it.
I pine in my brain. I sit here thinking at my easel about, oh man, I'd love to punch a time clock, And then also I think about, I get really excited when I have an excuse to put a suit on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm, summer or whatnot, I'm out here in a t-shirt and shorts and slip-on Vans. You're just literally a scumbag, but it's hot and you're dealing with it and you're on your own. The beauty of where I am here with my little shop in the dead center of Texas is Waco's a pretty sleepy, pretty big town. It's way behind the curve of progress, which is good and bad. I mean, I sort of thought like, hey, where could we go to lunch? There's nowhere cool in this town. It's a big town. Like you literally should have really cool spots. But anyhow, it's just a great hideout. I'm an hour from Dallas. I'm an hour from Fort Worth. I'm an hour from Austin.
Yeah.
And it's a great little launch pad. And then if I don't want to be bothered, I just shut the shop door and I'm in here, just doing my own deal. And 5 o'clock rolls around, 6, 7, 8, 2 in the morning sometimes, and you're like, that's when I get super creative.
Yeah.
However, you're like, man, I'd love to, punch a time clock maybe and go have dinner with my wife and, actually get a set paycheck at the end of the week, right? Because, I mean, there's times where that paycheck's a month off of it, or 2, 3 months, And with corporate stuff like I do, that's the biggest pain,
Yeah, it's tough to get the money off.
Yeah, how do you manage that? A lot of the people that listen to this are other makers starting out. What would your advice be to them on that front? Both the managing from what you're describing there is the loneliness of just sitting doing it yourself, as well as the sort of financial balance to it all.
Well, I think it's, luckily after all these years, I've gotten to a point where my clients now hunt me out more than I can even believe, they say, well, you're the artist, do what you want to do.
That's
Yeah.
awesome, man.
And I say, well, this is your storefront, you know, like, but we love what you do, and that's why we hired you. And that's really the way it should be with any of these craftsmen anywhere, you know. But the tendency is always like, oh, well, I like what you do, but could you do this or this or this? You know, and I always say, you see that little sign right there? It says sign writing, the world's second oldest profession.
Yeah.
Love it.
And you know, I always call myself an art prostitute because theoretically we are. You know, people are saying, hey, I want this word, and we go and do it. You know, I haven't done fine art in a long time, you know, and I would love to, but you don't get done painting and go paint,
Right.
you know. But as far as billing and all that sort of work, I'm in a pretty good place now, you know, knock on wood, which is exciting. Sorry, cowboy, raised by cowboys. The bigger the corporate job, the more of a pain, and it always is that way. They love to hold their money. That's how they stay wealthy, right?
Yep.
So I literally will talk to any big company like that, and I say, here's the deal. Like, I'm not ashamed anymore to just say, hey, what's the deal? When am I getting paid? Because they'll take advantage of it if you know, it's in their benefit to take advantage of it if you don't bring it up. So I'll work something out. I've even submitted bills 2 months before I can do the job.
Yeah.
You know, just so it's already in their system, because we all know, you know, goes from this place to this place, sits in a basket. They look at it for a month, then it goes over here, then it's lost.
Yeah. Lost. Yeah.
I've had wineries that I used to work for a lot of wineries out on the central coast of California, and we sent you your check. And I'm like, well, you know, and so like literally, you know, I've had to like go into you know, the guy that I worked for, apprenticed for, he was Irish and Portuguese were his parents, and he was hot. He was like, you know, he would go after money. He would box a guy. It was crazy. I mean, but that's old school, and that's the way that things used to be done. And he sent me out to like strip truck doors off with lacquer thinner that we had painted the week before on job sites. And you go to jail now for that, right? Because once it's on their vehicle, it's their property. But
which is mad in itself when you think about the complications of that. Yeah.
It's crazy. But literally, like, you know, it's. I learned as much from him what to do as I learned what not to do.
Yeah.
He was so cut and dry, but he was good at getting paid. You know, if we did our thing, I learned. You always have you know, you're kind of apprehensive to like go and approach someone, even when they owe you money, and go, hey, could I, you know, and almost beg for your money. But, you know, we have bills, we have mortgage, and we have, you know, car payments and everything. And it doesn't help us not to get paid. So.
No, absolutely.
And what was the other part of what you asked?
The sort of the working on your own, and what you described as, in essence, loneliness of working on your own and just having to crack on, and that work-life balance.
Work life is, you know, my workshop is in my yard.
Yep.
So when I'm home, you know, my wife and I will butt heads. She'll be at work all day. She does hair at a salon right down the way. And I'm ready to go do something. And she's tired. And she wants to make dinner and chill out. And I'm like, let's go do something downtown, you know? And that's the juxtaposition to both of our days. She's talking to people all day. She's done talking. You know, I've talked to nobody. I'm ready to go.
Totally understand, yeah.
So it's interesting in that fact. But literally, I mean, the solitary doesn't bother me as much. And I mean, I think now that we're all connected, right?
Yeah.
With phones or social media or whatnot, I mean, that's the social. I mean, not that I'm on my phone all day. I'm on my phone over coffee in the morning and answering emails and kind of lining things out. And then the reality is, this sign sitting in here is a 16-foot sign that's going to go down in southern Texas. And as a one-man shop, there's no one to do it. So you better do it. It's do or die, right? So I just get out here and I start doing what I do, and I don't know. I've been doing it so long, I don't even think about it anymore. But I do have an opinion on everything.
Yeah.
So they say, if you ever want an opinion on something, ask a cowboy because they've had plenty of time to think about it.
Yeah, okay.
So I would double that down, ask a sign writer that grew up as a cowboy, because I could tell you almost anything, because I'm never thinking about that. I'm never thinking about what I'm doing. People say, what did you paint today? I can't even recall the word. I don't even know what I wrote.
That's wild.
That is
So you're not thinking about it.
That's nuts.
At this point.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the technical, you're thinking about the artistic, you're thinking how you could pop a drop shadow different to give it a different flair. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I think I learned from Tom Green, who I apprenticed for, who's still doing it. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I'm not good at setting up for, I've known that if I was self-employed my entire life, that I would probably work till the day I die in some capacity. I'm trying to tweak it to where I want to. I have tweaked it to where I want to be. I'm still trying to tweak it a little more because, up and down ladders every day at 80 years old is not going to be fun. It's all going to backfire on me, I'm sure.
I hope not.
Hope not.
But, people that retire at 62 years old and then die the next day, I've seen that so many times, I at least was able to live as I was. I went every Wednesday with my daughter when she wasn't in school to the beach.
Nice.
Right. So, I mean, I was able to live as we grew older rather than wait until some like mystery date when you can just, hey, cool, now what do I do? And I think that's the thing. I talk to so many people that have retired and they're bored out of their mind. They're like, now what?
Yeah.
I don't have any structure. I don't have anything. And, I'll have some structure, hopefully. I don't know.
It's quite important that, isn't it? Building a life that you don't have to retire from. And that seems to be what makers are all striving for. They're building something that's sustainable, that they don't have to retire from it. And it just makes total sense.
Well, we're out of the norm for sure. We're out of the normal 401k and all that sort of bubble, So as a self-employed person, people say all the time, man, you're self-employed. That's great. I would love to get there someday. And I always tell them, careful what you wish for. Mm-hmm. It's not cut and dry. You have to scramble, like how many times have I dug the mortgage out the day it's due out of nowhere?
Yeah.
And that's part of the bank account, right? If that Schwinn has to go next month, it has to go next month. You know, I mean, it is what it is. Only because, I mean, that's the other thing, my books are super full right now. My next payday is like 3 weeks away, right?
Right.
So it's like, that's always the thing. So you're having to just like, okay, how do we, it's not always hand to mouth. It isn't anymore, but sometimes it is still.
Yeah.
And so how do you scramble? How do you literally look at it different than most people look at it? People panic.
Yeah.
Lose their minds and go limp. They don't know what to do. And that just means, okay, how do I get creative? Because it is a creative process, all of that.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
And I don't think people are cut from the right cloth a lot of times, That's why there is a time clock and there is a, boss. But if I had to do that, I mean, there's no way I could do it.
No.
I mean, I couldn't imagine going to work for some 30-year-old manager guy that was yelling at me.
No.
I mean, I don't know, I'm not necessarily violent, but I might, I don't know.
Yeah. I hear that. So going back to the apprenticeship, that was obviously prepping boards and backing boards and stuff originally. At what point did you turn to the sign writing?
Just quickly, just mind your speaker there.
Was it?
Just hidden.
Oh, yeah.
I should lose this jacket probably.
No.
I went, let's see, I started to paint signs sort of along the way. I was really blessed that the guy that I was apprenticing with, he had been doing it, I think, for 35 years at the time.
Oh.
So the guy that he had apprenticed for was retired. It was a different world in those days, too. There were no vinyl machines. There was no quick shortcut to an end point, which the 80s ushered in. Those guys, sign painters, in America it's sign painters. I started calling myself a sign writer just to sort of buy some credibility.
Right.
Because it sounded weird. It sounded really weird, It's funny how, and I'm not saying I'm the only guy that did that, but it's funny how now that's sort of universally accepted in America because it was never sign writers.
Oh,
It was
really?
sign painter, yeah.
Sign painter.
So I would have always known them as sign writers.
Right. So you would, for sure. And that's just an interesting thing, and I'll go back to, let's see, I'm all over the place, sorry.
That's all right.
Those old sign painters in whatever town they were in, they ruled because they were the guy to make your sign. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't go down to one of these giant stores and have a line of vinyl run out on a board with no, terrible execution and terrible placement and no layout or anything, which is what everything became. You had to go to that guy. So when I started apprenticing, he was coming to work in like super fancy, cashmere sweaters and a 930 Porsche, and he was ruling. He was really doing well at that point. He's still painting signs, barely, but I don't know. He just, he lived his life too. I mean, he made a ton of money, but it all kind of went somewhere too.
Right.
So those two guys, and then there was a guy, Tommy the Greek, who was a pinstriper, famous pinstriper from the 50s. He would come into the shop, and those guys were sort of showing me the ropes without me really understanding it. I didn't understand the relevance of the whole thing at the time. Sign painting wasn't cool. You would go out on a job somewhere and paint somebody's window or sign in the front, don't you guys say shingle?
Shingle?
Isn't a shingle like a store sign, or is that more British?
I don't know, maybe.
Or maybe it's like
Maybe I'd just call it a store
ago.
sign. Yeah. Yeah.
But so we'd go out and do that, and you'd literally be treated like the janitor.
Right.
Oh, are you done yet? Like, kind of thing. And so it was just, I never thought of it as cool. I thought of it as a way to make gas money and a way to allow me to, back in those days, you get paid on Friday and you'd be broke on Sunday, right? Because you go out with your buddies and, oh man, where'd that? But vinyl came in, everything was cheaper, faster, junkier, layout suffered, storefronts suffered, every single thing suffered. And I really credit the generation under me, whatever you want to call them, people will negatively call people hipsters or whatever. Yep. But I credit those younger people because they literally just said, we're tired of this throwaway world, if we're going to do a storefront, years ago, I started getting calls to go down to like Los Angeles and do storefronts on Sunset Boulevard or whatnot. And it was like, you go talk to the kid that owned the place, and he was 25 years old. And he's like, I want it to look like it did in 1900. Wow, well, that's going to be X amount. Well, I don't care. Right?
That's cool.
So that's where people started really putting their money where their mouth is. And it's important. I mean, it only makes sense. When someone pulls up to your business, they may not understand that your facade is hand painted, but there's a soul to it and a richness to it and a deepness to it that they inadvertently pick up.
Hand-painted storefront. I have never walked past a store that has a not knowingly, that has a hand-painted front and not wondered what's in the store.
Right.
Yeah.
Or stuck my head in the window.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So everybody will build out a shop, whatever it might be, say a coffee shop, and they'll put they have $200,000 to build out this coffee shop, and they'll spend all their money on all of this stuff, and then at the very last 11th hour, oh, we need a sign, and then they realize they have $70 left.
Yeah.
You know, and that's always been the case when that should have been the very first thing.
Because that's what's getting people in.
Because that's what brings people in the door.
A good storefront is like a magnet
Oh, yeah.
Right.
for getting people in.
Big time.
And that's come back around. That's come back around. I started seeing it maybe 15 years ago. And especially in the crafts. So boot makers, hat makers, stuff that I work for now, predominantly Fort Worth area and all around here, are all custom makers of some sort.
Nice.
So it would be ridiculous to go to American Hat, for instance, and not see the whole front of this 100-plus-year-old company all hand lettered.
Yep.
It would be ridiculous. If they had a little vinyl sticker on the window or something, you'd just be like, oh, that looks cheap.
Yeah, you
And
would.
it does look cheap. And Texas will make it look cheap immediately because it will peel up in like 2 months. you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a harsh sun out here.
Yep.
You know, so it's so, you know, but I'll go back to, it wasn't cool. I had been doing it for a number of years, and I had a good friend at a hot rod show say, "Man, you're a sign painter?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That's so cool." And that's when I first was like, wait a minute, you know, like, that's cool.
Yeah, you just said it was
And
cool.
so it started to, you know, you realize, like, I don't know how much you know about like hot rodding and whatnot, but you know the Rat Fink and that sort of thing. So Ed Roth, who did Rat Fink, Big Daddy Ed Roth, he was a sign painter.
No
Those
way.
guys were all sign painters. Kenneth Howard, Von Dutch was, you know, he became a striper, but he was an artist.
Yep.
You know, he was literally just an artist that applied his craft towards that world. And they're icons. They're iconic guys now, you know. I said that pretty weird, but so, you know, then it became cool. And when I went out on my own, I thought, okay, what do I call my company? And I said, well, you know, you're always looking for that logo that somebody can see and go, oh man, and apply it to the name of your company. So I said, well, I'll just use the brand, the cattle brand. And I deliberately put design on the back to buy credibility.
And that was your family's cattle brand, the Lucky Bee?
Yes.
Right.
And it worked. That word design, people approach you different.
Okay.
All right.
If you were Lucky Bee Sign Company and you would go out and do a thing, you know, that was in the time when I was, you know, literally just, you know, you were just a guy doing a job. And I think design, I mean, I remember thinking to myself, if I put design on there, that'll buy me some sort of credibility. And
Nice.
it really worked out. So it's,
Interesting.
I don't know that it would make a difference now, but, you know, we're all looked at for what we do now.
Yeah.
Back then you were just, you know, looked out for, you know, oh, I need my name on the door.
Well, it's easy to look at people for what they do now because of social media and the likes
Sure,
of Instagram.
sure.
That's all you see, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
For sure. So anyhow, when I was being taught, and then I formally started to be taught, people say, how long did it take you to learn? The only answer I have is it took me a solid 2 years to quit thinking about what I was doing.
Right.
Okay.
Which at that point, I think I had it. Prior to that, and to his credit, I mean, the guy that I apprenticed for, he literally, oh, that looks terrible, go do it again. And it was like, do it faster, do it faster. It was always this kind of like thing. And I thought, man, he's, there were times, I mean, we would get into it, big time. We were like father, son, pretty much. And it was like, what he taught me, though, later backfired on me because I was just blowing through jobs with precision. And, he'd go, well, I don't have anything else for you today. And I'd go, well, how about you put me on a salary because you taught me how to get, so rather than pay me this 20-hour week, pay me a 40-hour salary. Oh, I can't do that, kind of thing. So that's what kicked me out the door as far as, well, I'll do this on my own.
Nice.
I had been doing stuff on the side for quite a while anyhow. So then I just turned it into my full time.
Nice one.
Which kick in the scramble mode, right?
Yeah. Big time.
For sure. So do or die. And that's, luckily I did it when I was, let me think, very early 30s.
Wow.
Because I started, so June 1st, 1989 is the day that I started as a sign writer.
And you've been self-employed sign writer ever since?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I have not had a job since then, other than my job.
Other than your only job, yeah. That's cool. There's a lot of
Yeah.
credit to that. That's a long time to be doing it. The world's seen some ups and downs through that time as well.
The world has, yeah. But that's where, again, vinyl came in, and so we lost, say, the city trucks, or if when I was a kid, you would drive down the highway, and every semi-truck would have this amazing painted door, and everyone took such pride in their vehicle because that was their office, and it was all super custom, and cars had all this custom stuff. Every construction company had a beautiful logo, and then it just became super bastardized. And it was just half the time it's crooked, half the time it's run all the way to the parameter, and there's no negative space to let it survive on its own. And it just went super bad. And so when we lost all of that work, it was like, what do we do? Who is still doing this? So for a lot of years, it was custom motorcycles, vintage drag race cars, because they all wanted turned gold leaf letters, and there's no way to fake it.
Yeah.
So we were doing that, and we were doing high-end boats. That was like the big work, which was great work because somebody buys a $200,000 Cobalt boat, they want their name hand lettered on it and their numbers hand lettered on it, So it's just the way that we went, and it kept me in I keep saying we, but I'm saying we as
You and the company.
the group of guys. Once I left, the group of guys around me had to go that way.
Right.
Because there was no other way to go.
Right.
And there's a lot of sign painters that you can talk to. I mean, there's a guy up the road here. And I was literally, prior to moving here, I stopped in to see this place that had amazing signage and pinstriping all over it. And I was going in to look. It was like a woodworking shop. And I went in, and there's the guy has this little sign shop set up in the front of it too. So he's a buddy of the guy that owns this woodworking shop. And I start talking to him, and I tell him, yeah, I'm a sign painter. Oh, cool. Oh, man. It's really terrible, and nobody wants to pay for anything, this and that. And these old boys that are mostly unwilling, but unable to have adapted and gone to social media or websites or any of that, they've all died on the vine. Now they'll all complain because they were used to, like I say, when I started apprenticing, people coming through their door because they were the only guy.
Yeah.
I'm talking to this guy who's complaining about a $75 job that came back to him that he's having to repair. And the very next day I was going to do a $7,000 mural just up the road.
Wow.
And I didn't tell him that.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's out there. You just got to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't wait for it to come to you. You have to go and find it.
Yeah, and do this incredible work like he's doing, because he was doing amazing work. If you put it out there, you know, people will find it.
Yeah.
And people will come to you for that. Because like you say, there's not many people doing it. Nope. And when somebody's really good, and these old boys are so good at it. I mean, they literally... The guy that I apprenticed for didn't even make patterns. He'd snap a top line and a bottom line and hash mark with chalk and run down 20 foot just on fonts that he knew in his brain, and they were perfect. The kerning was perfect. Every part of it was perfect. He had 4 fonts that he did. But I mean, that was such an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And that's gone. Like, I surprise myself when I'm out in the field and someone throws you a curve and says, can you put this word over here? I do surprise myself, and I can pull it off.
Yeah.
Because my immediate thought is like, oh, well, I gotta make a pattern and do it. Then you just do it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's, you know, yeah.
So you talked there about, you know, the old guys that could just like, snap a line in, and how has your workflow evolved? Because now we're in a day where, you know, you've got the iPad behind you, you could pull out the iPad and you could pre-stuff on the iPad. But what does your work look like now from a set-out point of view, or from the early beginnings, compared to what it does now, or what it did then? Because there's an embracing of technology, isn't there? There's a shunning of, and
there's a slight in my point. This iPad I have, I've only had since, I think, I've only had it a few months.
right.
Yeah.
I was hand illustrating drawings for pen and ink drawings, like what we would call camera ready artwork.
Yep.
Up until like just a few months ago.
Wow.
And that's very time consuming. You know, you're 40 hours into this drawing, and you know, it doesn't really make sense when you're 40 hours into this drawing and you get like $800 for it. You know, you're like, wow, that was a
rough week.
It didn't really work out.
Yeah.
You know, so, and the people, funny enough, that really, really cherish that and still cherish it and will still want me to do it are my Japanese clients.
Really?
Right? They want something handmade. And even though, like, you know, I have some buddies over there, Hopping Shower and Doodle and all these guys that are doing amazing artwork, the Japanese really want an American to do their artwork, which is kind of cool too, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but the trying to get back to your point, what was the actual question?
How the workflow's changed from the early days of being able to snap lines and draw all by hand to, and maybe not so much just yours, but so I certainly noticed that when iPads came out, the tattoo culture changing to people just sketching it out on iPads instead, and there's totally a place for that. But now every so often when I see someone just hand drawn it, I'm like, oh
nice.
Man, that's the one.
Next level.
And that's usually the guys I end up getting tattooed.
Well, that's okay. So what I've been using this iPad for now is generally just to draft up. I've done a few T-shirts for people now, you know, like a design that way, which I can, prior to that machine, and I don't know my way around that machine. I've found my way around that machine, and I guarantee it's like 20 steps deeper and weirder around than the guy that actually knows how to work it. And that's the way I do everything. I have this vinyl plotter right here. It's from like 1996.
Right.
I'm on 95 on this. I mean, it's not on anymore, but this computer right here is on Windows 95. And all that machine is I can pull up certain fonts, and there's not many, and run out a line of copy.
Right.
And I'll, I tape like a Sharpie marker into the thing that's like totally super glued together. It's all broken. That's my technology.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing a wall on a building, it prints that out. I could draw that. It'll just take me a day longer.
Yeah.
And so it's all working smarter than working harder. But, I view that, people will say, all these younger kids will say, oh, well, we don't use any sort of computer. We only hand draw and well, I ask them then, do you use like a hand saw when you're cutting your boards, or do you use a skill saw? Well, I use a skill saw. And I'm like, well, it's the same tool. That's just a tool in the arsenal. That's not my whole deal.
Yeah.
So it's a way to jump that forward. But yeah, a lot of stuff, if I see a logo or whatnot and somebody wants that logo, I'll draw that thing up.
Yeah.
A lot of, like you could see that A up there.
Yep.
That was something, just a little study I did for a job,
Really?
And it's like, it's just, how can you make a fat and skinny wooden letter,
Wooden letter, yeah,
So
long letter.
it's like just something I drew up for a job, It's funny, most of those recycle bins are full of patterns that are just in the trash,
Really?
Because where are you going to have them all, But I think there's definitely a huge balance between the two, My technology that I'm embracing is super out of date. I mean,
But it's enough for
super
you.
out of date.
Yeah.
But it's years ago, this machine was new. And my wife came out into the shop and said, why are you doing vinyl? You would do a vinyl hours or something for a business.
Yeah.
And you would do all this work and go downtown and apply it and literally get paid whatever it was, $100 bill.
Yeah.
So you're literally wasting your time, basically, And not to sound cocky or anything, but I don't open my job box for that anymore,
Yeah.
She said, everyone's doing vinyl. And I was still hand lettering, but I was subsidizing it with cutting some vinyl here and there and doing some stuff. And she goes, why don't you just like solely do the hand painting? No one's doing that. And so I sort of said, well, yeah, I guess you're right. And kind of backed up a little bit away from the vinyl part. And really haven't looked back,
Really?
I mean, it's everything I do is brush.
Yeah.
Every single thing.
Nice.
Except for some design work that I'm now doing on this iPad that I
Right.
don't know how to really use. But it's cool to me that I can render that. I render something in there just like I rendered this little cowboy.
Yep.
And I render something and I can email it straight away and it's camera ready. It's
Yeah.
ready to go.
Yeah, and it can be printed on T-shirts. and
It can be printed on T-shirts.
Yeah.
And I have the accessibility to full color it and do all these elements that I have no accessibility to prior. So I would send the customer a piece that was black outline or silhouetted or something that way, and say, okay, well, you can fill in those negative spaces with whatever color.
Right.
Or I would color pencil it in, which then doesn't translate. So every way I approach everything it seems like is the opposite way that every next guy approaches everything. Mm-hmm. So if it has to go to somebody else, they're like, we can't work with this. So that iPod's just kind of leveled the playing field for me.
Right. It's a communication tool then, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, because if I find a guy that can still think backwards, there's always a way to get something accomplished with limited resources. It's just you have to be able to think.
Yeah.
And if I take a piece of hand illustrated artwork down to have it scanned, so then theoretically, and I've drawn it oversized so it will shrink down, it's camera ready artwork. But then I have to take that scan and send it out, and then there's always something on the other end. We need to rework this, or we need to do this, And it's just that people quit thinking or now learning in the problem solving world.
Okay.
You know, do you have this on a disc or whatever? You know, I'm dating
USB,
myself there.
yeah.
USB. Yeah. I'm giving myself away, but no, I don't. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of times I've never done drawings. I've sketched out things like that A up there.
Yeah.
For clients, and then I ask them always to think about what it will look like, and that's a tough sell because people can't think like that often.
Yeah. So I do a lot of my work in film and work with a lot of creatives, and getting someone to envisage it based on description and basic sketches and even in the 8 years I've been doing it, is getting harder and harder and harder. Because everyone wants to see an animation or a quick put together video, or they just want to see the real thing like that. That must be difficult.
It is, especially for me, because I can see it in my head before I even I can see it while they're describing it to me.
Yeah.
It'll come to me.
Yeah.
And I say, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And a lot of times people will cower and go, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, believe me.
Yeah.
It'll
I've
be
been doing
really-
this a while.
It'll be really cool, you know? And so that's always very odd to me that I totally see the finished product, you know, months before it's even done. And I have to ask people to trust me. And that's been pretty easy. I mean, you know, like I say, people literally say, do what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's great.
So, I mean, I guess that's a good spot to be in, what you work for forever, to be in that spot where you have that kind of freedom. But, you know, or there's other times where someone will bring you a product or you know, come up with this for me. They'll task you with something. And the way the artistic mind works is very weird even to me, because if I have a 3-month window, it'll often come the night before it's due.
Yeah.
And that's not any sort of slacker. People look at that and go, oh, these artists are slackers. It's not that. And I'll tell people, you know, I have to let it talk to me.
Yeah.
Which sounds like you're some kind of hippie or something, you know. Like, oh, yeah. But literally, it's not that. I don't know where that inspiration comes from. I don't know where, but it comes, and it sometimes comes really late. And you'll pull this thing out, and people are like, oh my gosh. You don't necessarily let them know you did it last night.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know. Do you have that same kind of blockage ever? I don't know. It's almost like
do. I think pressure makes a good thing come out.
right.
If
And
you
I
don't,
think
if
it's
you
the
don't
same
get it
for
straight away.
writers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Writers.
If you don't know what you're doing straight away, just let it mull over for a while. And then, certainly in the design work I do, letting the pressure build up. You know, if I know I've got 6-8 weeks to do one of the projects, which is very rare, but if I have got that time, it's really hard to get started.
Sure.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think it's a laziness thing. I think it's just I don't have a vision for what it needs to be.
It's not at all a laziness thing. It's probably has something to do with the way that our brains work and the way that you know, the same thing I got in trouble in school for.
Yeah.
Because I didn't care. You know, I was terrible at math my whole life, which is, I think, a fairly common artist problem. Wrong side of the brain.
Yeah.
But I breezed through college in, like, you know, language and art and, you know, all the things, you know, like, you know, English.
Yeah.
Straight away, you know, and but that's more creative to me.
Right.
You know, it works with my thought process.
Yep.
So, yeah. Hopefully, I answered that question. I go
absolutely.
all over the place. but-
You mentioned there, you know, you're at a stage now where people just say you do you. When did that start to happen? At what point do you remember when that shift came where people were just like, you just do you?
No, I think it's been gradual over the years. Now this little niche I'm in is they understand that I champion the cowboy, that I understand the historical cowboy, and I understand. I mean, it seems absurd to say, oh, you know, this cowboy lettering. You know, we want, you know, but I mean that's fairly basic spur letter, but it's
Yep.
very cowboy.
Yeah, very.
You know, flourishes and all this sort of stuff that I do pertain to that, and I tweak weird fonts and all this kind of stuff and make it that plays into a lot of the Fort Worth work and all that kind of stuff. Where you went to the rodeo the other night,
Yep.
a lot of my work's on that street.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Cool.
so I work up there quite a bit, and it's I think that people in the Western world understand that. You know, like I've designed T-shirts for bands, and I do a bunch of work on the corporate level for Boot Barn, and you know, which is a big
Yeah.
American.
Yeah, we've seen them on every billboard between all the states.
And they're trying to now rebate and become that old time Western store again. Our friends are doing a bunch of work with them to try and restore it because their stores just became a blown out department store at some point. So now through the creative and through, they're pushing some envelopes. You know, that company really is. I think their campaign last year or the year before, they shot in Greenland
Nice.
Okay.
with American cowboy stuff, so that the whole contrast just worked beautifully from an artistic point of view. You know, wow, that doesn't make any sense, but it's amazing. Now, a lot of people are like, that makes no sense and it's dumb, but a lot of people don't understand
They
things.
just don't get it. Like if it doesn't click, they just don't get it.
It's almost like they choose not to get it, right?
Yeah, okay.
I think there's people that put their foot in, you know, they're sticking the mud and they're like, this is it. We can't. You saw the stockyards the other day.
Yep.
That stockyards 10 years ago was dead.
Really?
And the stockyards all across America are gone or dead. You know, Kansas City and, you know, Oklahoma City and all those stockyards are barely holding on. That stockyards in Fort Worth, people have come in, big money has come in. That's the big, you know, everyone's big concern. Who are these people from outside of the Western world that have come in and bought into the Western world? Well, if they're hiring craftsmen that understand it, I've come to realize that they're not doing an injustice. That stockyards is full of people from all over the world that are coming with their families, that are getting this experience, and they're spending money. You know, our friends that have boot companies and hat stores and all this kind of stuff. I mean, families come in, they'll buy a $700 cowboy hat.
Yep.
You know, they're not buying a little $20 straw hat on the corner that their kids are going to wear.
We did notice like there were some really nice like shops there, and
Do
like,
you know, it's one of the things that really surprised us about it, wasn't it? It was,
it felt legit.
yeah, it felt legit. A lot of these places are kind of like make-believe cowboy towns to get the feel for it for $20, and like you say, the $20 plastic straw hat. But that was like,
I didn't get that vibe there at
it
all.
was the real deal. You know,
Well,
the Ariat store.
you're in the heart of it right there.
Yeah.
I mean, the heart of it is, you know, if you think about, if you go back a century, Fort Worth essentially was the Western Front.
Really?
As people pushed west, Fort Worth was the boundary. I mean, it was Indian land past. And if you were out in Indian land, there's some history here that blows me away. And that's what really excites me. You know, the Comanche tribes that were here, they couldn't beat them. I mean, my favorite book is Empire of the Summer Moon, which is the story of Quanah Parker, who was the last great Indian chief here, right here in this area.
Nice.
Really?
And the U.S. couldn't get them.
No matter all their tech and guns, they had bow and arrows and tomahawks.
No, I mean, you know, I'll get super nerdy on it, but I love history. I mean, as you can see in the shop. They say a Comanche warrior could let 10 arrows hanging sideways on his horse, shooting under the horse's neck so that he was
Guarded.
guarded from any bullet. He could let 10 arrows loose in the time that one guy could repack his gun.
Wow.
And they were just insane. So I know we're totally sidetracked, but that's
right.
what really drives me here. Anywhere I go, we're in the midst of that history. So as the Easterners, which were all European, right, that came to America and then started coming across, Fort Worth was kind of that actual Western front for some time. So that stockyards is super historical.
Yeah.
And then they pushed across and removed all the Indians and did everything that happened in history. And, that in itself is history, but it's like, this was the Old West in the middle of the country, basically.
Yeah.
So
you moved to Waco recently, though, didn't you, from California?
yeah, just a little over 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you seem to have found your feet in here really, really well. Seems to suit you.
California is interesting because you hear about San Francisco and Los Angeles all the time, and they're densely populated areas, San Diego and some of those bigger towns. But 80% of California is rural. 80% is ag, whether it's, cattle ranches, horse ranches, or farming. And so where we lived on the Central Coast was between San Francisco and LA, 3 hours from each. And it is this guarded piece of God's country. I mean, it's just big rolling mountain ranges. And, so we were very prepared for coming here.
Right.
I miss the mountains. I miss the marine layer. There's a number of things that I miss from home, but, we grew up the same way as people here. And people are often critical, oh, you're from California. And that's the big deal here right now, because there are a lot of people moving back from California to the Texas area and pricing, buying houses sight unseen for money that they've never gone for. But that's just, I think, the pendulum. We had a Dust Bowl that pushed everyone out to the West Coast from this part of the world. I think their grandbabies are coming back home, because California is out of hand. Pricing, regulations, taxing on it's just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
We moved here following our kids and grandbabies, and that was our real motive. Our real motive. I've been all over the world, and that part of the country out there is where I was always happy to live, to come back to. But this is pretty good. And coming back, it was a little bit scary. Like, oh man, am I going to have work?
Yep.
I'm moving a shop, but the 2 years I think prior to moving back, I was here almost 6 months out of each year working already.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it was
Makes
a
sense.
safe move at that
So
point.
we switched home bases basically.
Yeah.
So my truck's got 100,000 miles on it. It's 2 years old. You know?
Wow.
Wow. I thought
wife-
I'd done mega miles.
Yeah, yeah.
That's mega.
My wife's truck, same way. Hers a year older, and we're over 100,000. But it's because we were, we cover a lot of ground,
Yeah.
and we don't always fly.
Yeah. And you can cover a lot of ground
You
in America
can.
as well, can't you? That's what we've noticed. We flew so we've got a week and a half left in the States, but we flew into Atlanta. We've done like
Right.
4,000 miles
Yeah.
to get across here. And it's
Yeah.
been up and down. It was up to Tennessee and then back down through Alabama.
Sure.
And back. But you can just connect. That
Real
must be
quick.
good from a business point of view,
Yeah.
from a getting started and getting out there point of view.
Well, yeah, and the thing that blows me away, and I haven't really gone too far east yet. I mean, I've been into Arkansas to do some work and a few things like that, but I've grown up on the West Coast. So New York was always, 3,500 miles away.
Yeah.
I've been to every state, I think, but New York and a couple of those up in the top when I was a kid. But now I'm smack dab in the middle of the country.
Yep.
So New York is the same distance as Los Angeles. So,
From here, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
or
wow.
real close, yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Like, it does open the door, you know?
It does.
I mean, I've worked for Harley in Milwaukee, but I flew in for that work. But now it's like, oh, Milwaukee is a 1.5-day drive,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Before it was, you couldn't do it.
Wild.
I mean, you could.
Yeah.
Would
But it's
you?
hard work.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the road.
Yeah.
I get real antsy if I'm stuck in the shop too long.
Okay.
I think I'm that old time rounder at heart. You know, I love being out on the road. I get very creative when I'm out on the road. I document a lot of, I waste a lot. I don't know if it's waste time. I spend a lot of time actually pulling into every neat old town because I feel like
I don't think it's waste time.
No,
I feel
that's
like
awesome.
I might never see it again.
Yeah. I don't think it's waste time. You know, we've made a conscious effort this trip of just like, if someone's like, oh, you're not quite going past it, but if you swing in there, it's cool. I'm like, I'm there.
Yeah.
That's what life's about, you know, picking up all these experiences and seeing them.
That's it. And photographing that, you know, I've photographed old neon signs since I was 15 years old, and my parents were always like, oh, you should like make a book, and everyone's done it at this point. But it's like, it's funny now with social media, someone will post an old neon sign, and before I even read the thing, I know right where it is.
Yeah, that's
Because
awesome.
I've seen that sign in Milwaukee, or I've been to that sign in Texas, or I've seen it in Kansas, or whatever it is, and you're literally like, oh man, I know that. And
I've been there.
yeah, and you're almost chronicling that. In my mind, you're chronicling that before it's gone, because it's all going.
It's all going at some point, yeah.
And I mean, literally, if you talk to people across the nation and you say, "Oh, what do you think of that Art Deco building?" I would be completely disappointed and amazed, but not that amazed at how many people say it should be leveled and made into a Walmart.
Yeah.
Because people don't cherish the crafts and the people, the craftsmen that went into. I mean, you know, new houses have no soul.
Yeah. Well, we specifically, when we were buying a house, you know, our house was built in 1863.
Oh, wow.
And it was cut up into 6 flats then. And the cut-up job had no soul, but at least the building had soul.
Sure.
And we went right back to, you know, I'd rebuilt all the old paneling the way it used to be, and I'd start redoing the staircase, how it used to be, and, you know, all those things. It was just like, that's how buildings used to be, and that's what keeps them together.
It's amazing our house is only 1956, which in America is old.
Yeah.
You know, you could buy if you're on the East Coast, you could buy a 1700s home, but you get into here. Waco was leveled in 1953 by a tornado that went right down Main Street.
Really?
And really blew out everything.
Wow.
And so the response to that was this sprawl that came out here. So when you look around, it's all mid-century because that was the big boom. We really liked that mid-century thing, and we kind of were like, I told you we sort of came back to stay with our kids during COVID, which was a whole different deal, you know.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of idle time and had to get real creative. I mean, that's the other thing. It was a Thursday morning. My phone had 4 emails in roughly the same hour. 4 clients canceled, and 25 grand or better fell off my job book immediately.
Yeah.
And I went, oh man. And my wife said, well, don't worry, I have the salon and we'll be fine. And the next day the governor somehow determined that salons were spreading COVID in California and ordered them all shut.
It's the same back home, yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have a rebate at that point. Like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Like, we're going to live on whatever savings we have and whatever. And they were saying it was going to be 2 weeks, and it turned out, obviously we know how it all went, but the kids called and said, get back here. And we said, well, we can't just drop everything and get back here. And they were like, well, why can't you? And so I had just butchered a steer.
Right.
So I had this full beef in the freezer. And we put a freezer on a trailer and that Triumph motorcycle and 2 bloodhounds. And we drove back to Texas. And we were here for 3 months, I think. And we again had to get creative, you know. There was an egg shortage and all sorts of things going on here in everywhere in America, I guess. But and whether there was or not, I don't know. The media loves to create shortages, and then they just like everyone goes panic mode, and so people were running out and buying chickens because they were going to get eggs from chickens. But when city people go out and buy chickens, they don't realize that there's 20 weeks roughly for that chicken to become mature, that you're feeding that little chicken before an egg actually drops. Mm. So we kind of did some research real quick, and my son-in-law and daughter, we were kind of like, well, let's grab a bunch of money and go down. So we went down to almost the Mexican border, and we bought I think it was 300 chickens.
Wow.
And I shouldn't say this on your podcast because I'll probably get a tax bill, but
we can cut this bit out.
I think it was we paid $8 a chicken, and we came back and we just on Facebook and everything put out ads for age of lay chickens, you know, and sold them for what they go for, $25 a head, you know, and that's how we made our money. We just, you know, it's just how do you step back, analyze this situation, and creatively go forward on it. And that's the thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, do I want to work for some kid if the whole bottom fell out of anything? No.
They couldn't be creative and they couldn't make,
But would I go work at McDonald's? If I had to, I probably would.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would I be excited? No. Yeah. Would I think of a way out of it? Yes.
Yeah. 30 seconds off it and, and it's all totally fine. But yeah, 99% of the time it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. It makes it easy for us to get out there.
Yeah, we're also in a stage where we kind of need to rebrand the word podcast because it's become like this big thing, hasn't it? Podcasting's become a thing, and we're like, these are just conversations. This is no different to the conversations you're having any other day of the week, and that's kind of what we're trying to build.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, I like it. I much prefer this style because the other thing is a lot of maker, and it's why we went for this kit, not only the travel convenience of it, it's not the big mic in your face, you've not got the cans on, you can just talk normally.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And it's still really good quality.
Right.
And that's what it's all about for us. You know, we had one of the girls we podcasted with, we were talking for a good 40 minutes before she eased up, and then I had to go back and ask the start question again without her noticing, you know, do it as sly as I could so she wouldn't notice, just so that she was her best self.
Yeah.
And so she could represent herself well.
Well, and I think that, I mean, that may happen with me too. I'll get off on a rant and go somewhere with it. So.
It's all good.
Okay.
It's all good. It's all good.
So we talked loads about your sort of upbringing and getting to this stage, but now you're very well established. You do a lot of work for the Born Free. You alluded a little bit about the work with Harley Davidson. How did that all come about, and what did that work all entail?
Born Free was started by 2 good friends, Grant Peterson and Mike Davis, and they were we were all had, you know, kind of cut down vintage motorbikes of some sort. A lot of people started with Triumphs. A lot of people had, you know, I had a bunch of old Harleys when I was a kid when you could buy them for
buttons,
$1,500 for some old 60s custom that you would tweak around a little bit, and funny, you would try and change it. But now it's like all that stuff you took off is super desirable, you know, again. So it's like, but it's just that progression of, I mean, most of the guys building bikes, there's a real interesting correlation between skateboarding and motorcycling as you get older. Mm-hmm. It's weird. I think it's this creative process. Skateboarding is a very creative thing you can do on your own terms as a kid, and get you out and does a bunch. The progression from that is, you know, some guys will skate till they're 50 years old. Other guys went to other things like motorcycles or cars or any of that. So Born Free was started by a couple buddies that were literally like, well, we got all these handful of friends kind of all over the, you know, all over the place. Let's put something together where we can kind of bring everyone together. And unlike most motorcycle shows, it was bringing mostly vintage style chopper stuff. And that was like 16 years ago, maybe 17 years ago, because we had to stop a couple years for COVID, obviously. I've already said COVID more than I've said it in the last 3 years in this talk. But literally, so that show went from, I think, 150 friends, essentially, that got together in a parking lot, to now, I mean, the numbers are insane. Yeah. I mean, we don't even have a good count.
Yeah.
But what Born Free did for all of us was huge in the fact that it took us all into all these different avenues of recognition.
Yeah.
So going to Japan every time I've gone is because Moon Eyes, the hot rod company that is Japanese owned.
Is it Japanese owned?
Yeah, and it has been. So Shige, who worked for Dean Moon, when Dean passed away, he had willed it to Shige.
Ah, okay.
So he felt that, and that was a big thing because his son didn't get the company. It went to a Japanese guy who worked for the company, but and I think Shige bought it. But I don't know the whole specifics of that, but it was like put forth that it would go to him.
Yeah.
And I think that Dean Moon understood that these Japanese guys really know what's up. I mean, I say all the time the Japanese are better at us than we are.
Yeah. Yep, I hear that. I hear that.
They are, because, I mean, everything they do is just that much further of what we do. So, like, that opened the door to going to Japan, which was a whole crazy different deal. Friends over there, clients over there, all this stuff over there that's happened because of Born Free. Harley Davidson is a headline sponsor for Born Free. That opened the door for us to go back to Harley Davidson. My buddies have been back a lot. I mean, they've had sit-down meetings with Harley Davidson where, you know, Willie G. Davidson and the whole crew are saying, how do we get the youth market back?
Really?
And they're asking our friends that started Born Free. Well, the answer is start making stuff that the kids want and put it at a price point that they can get.
Not the $60,000 motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, and the byproduct of that is, you know, I don't want to speak here, but I mean, I'm not misspeaking. I just don't want to put my foot in my mouth with somebody I do work with. But literally, their demographic is 65 and older, and that demographic is dying off.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know the future of that. But that's how we got in, was Born Free. Born Free, you'll see it all over my shop because it's such a big part of what I've done in the last almost 20 years. I do the artwork for it. It's not my show, but I have super, super solid friends. My major core group of friends that aren't cowboy guys are through Born Free.
Nice.
The beauty of Born Free was, prior to that, when I was 18 years old, I got a 67 generator shovel head, and I rebuilt that whole bike. And actually, before that, I had a little pan head I was trying to do. But those bikes were cheap at the point. And growing up where I grew up, there were clubs. I'm not going to talk about the clubs, but you can know what clubs I'm talking about on the West Coast. And it was always like, and that's not even a bad thing necessarily. The old club guys were cool.
Yeah.
The new club guys,
less so.
I have zero I have zero interest in. Let's just put it that way. And so, even at that point, though, I was an 18-year-old kid with a restored generator shovel head, beautiful bike, and I was so nervous all the time because there's no key, just kick that thing over and go, and but there was also a lot of bias towards whatever it was, like Japanese bikes or whatever it was. You could kind of get a little bit of a free rein if you had a British bike because, old bikers, they grew up the same way we all did. I mean, they all, it's funny, like most old bikers at some point drove a Volkswagen, right? You don't think about that. But it's the same beast as a Harley. Air cooled.
Yep.
It's just got a couple more cylinders. But I was always so worried about this or that, and you couldn't pull up on there'd be no way in the world you could pull up on a GPZ, a Kawasaki or something into some biker bar where there were a bunch of Harleys because there was such a regulation kind of thing that everyone would give you a hard time and whatnot. Born Free took that whole thing off the board.
Nice.
And, oh, cool, you ride. I saw a guy on a 47 knucklehead with every accessory known to man, and just that deal, a Kawasaki GPZ, pulled up next to him at Born Free, and the old boy on the knucklehead said, oh, cool, man, that thing's awesome. It's super, like that would have never happened.
Yeah.
So it took all of the negative out of the thing.
Nice.
That's cool. It kind of burst down barriers, didn't it?
Well, you ride.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whatever, I used to ride scooters.
Yeah.
And, guess what? So did all the old bikers.
Yeah.
I'd have old bikers talk to me on a Vespa about the Vespa they had in the 50s.
Nice.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
But,
that must be quite important for makers and for artists to get involved in a community like that. Like Born Free seems to be an extreme example of that, where it's just it's become this massive show stroke spectacle, and I don't mean that in the negative sense of the word spectacle, but it's a beautiful big spectacle. But the community that's given you and the work that you've then been able to get out of that and the exposure you've been able to get from that must have been really important, and maybe for other makers coming in.
I think so, because just the core of it promotes everything we do.
Yeah.
I've painted a bunch of those bikes.
Nice.
I've striped a bunch of that stuff. I do. So Born Free is different in the fact that there will be 30 to 37 builders. And they're working right now building bikes for this next show.
Yeah.
And they're building scratch-built bikes. And I'm not saying they're just throwing a bunch of old parts together. They're building... We had a guy from Sweden a couple, 3-4 years ago, or shows ago. And Ringo, I think is his... I hope I'm not getting guys confused. But he brought a chopper long bike, like a 70s style chopper with and I hope I'm getting everything correct here. There's so many builds, but I think it was a Husqvarna twin.
No way.
From the 30s?
Oh, an old Husqvarna twin. I don't even think I've seen one of them. I thought when you said Husqvarna twin, I'm thinking like...
They never made one. It was a prototype blueprint. And he built the motor from the blueprints from the 30s.
No way.
And if that's not giving you chills, it still gives me chills, because
That's
it's
insane.
like people, there's a criticism now that like maybe Born Free is Jump the Shark, right? You might not know what Jump the Shark, that's when Fonzie jumped the Shark Tank and like the Happy Days show was no cool anymore. Anyhow, there's my wife. People are like, oh, it's gotten lame. Oh, it's this. Oh, they don't allow club colors. Oh, which isn't them. It's the sheriff's department. And guess what? No club colors is pretty cool, because no one's starting problems with each other, and everyone's having a good time. Yeah. So it's, but the caliber of builds at Born Free is next level. I mean, it's out of control next level.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's everything. It's not building just a hardtail section on this previously softtail bike. It's, oh, let's build this whole frame, or, oh, let's make a motor from scratch. He brought the heads over in his luggage and had never screwed everything on last minute and fired it up in the motel room the night before.
That's nuts.
And that bike fired and ran.
That's crazy.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jack.
Teresa.
This is my
Hi,
wife's
I'm
Kate.
Kate. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having us today.
Enjoying the conversation.
Yeah.
They say I'm interesting.
You kind of are.
Do you want to hang out here, or do you want to get yourself together and hang out in the warmth, or what?
Yeah, I don't know. I might come back out.
Okay,
You do what you do, you.
Yeah.
go for it. There's, I think, a chair in the other garage right by that
While I'm
barbecue.
around them, I'll start speaking like them.
That's right. Our daughter said yesterday, I said, man, they, and you have her favorite accent, by the way, I think,
really?
right? Isn't that the favorite?
Where are you from?
So I'm
yeah.
just outside Edinburgh originally.
I'm
Kate's Glasgow.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
There you
Glasgow.
go.
Yeah.
That's it.
We got it. We brought it for you.
I mean, most people would be like, oh, Scotland, that's my favorite accent. But I'm like, no,
There's
but you're
about
from
20.
there.
Yeah.
I had to watch that. I had to watch that whole Outlander series just because she loved the way that everyone talked.
More like the movie Braves because you
Yeah.
got all the different dialects. Of
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Brave's a good one.
That's a good
Brave's
film.
a good one. Outlander has kind of ruined our local area.
Yeah.
So we don't
has
talk
it?
about, oh yeah,
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
Everyone coming to see tourist spots and stuff, and you're like,
Yeah.
Oh, that's bad. Well, that's
park
what
in the
that's
car
what
park,
we were.
not the road.
That's what we were talking about earlier with Magnolia,
Yeah.
right, in this town, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it brings thousands and thousands and thousands of people to a town that didn't have anything going prior. So they've done a really cool thing.
Yeah.
But then the old locals will say, "Oh, those people," you know, and it's like a negative. But it's even the hound dog agrees. But
Wicked. Sorry, so yes, like Born Free, that community seems to have just broke down barriers.
I think, and it's interesting that the big headline sponsors are Harley and Vans, you know, which is very Southern California. But they understand the connection, you know. So it's like, it's funny when we were young, you know, friends that were surfers or skateboarders or whatever, you know, the big criticism was like, they're slackers, they're never going to amount to anything. Pretty solid amount of skateboarders that are running big companies.
Yeah,
you
there
know?
is.
Hey, it's just creativity, right?
Yep.
So like, and it's transferred into the motorcycle world too. So it's, I think what that taught a lot of people, and I'm not saying everyone's a skateboarder,
No.
but what that mindset is that shared with the other people around that maybe did or didn't skate is self-governed creativeness and problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah, the self-governed creativeness, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The just doing it your way.
Yeah.
That seems to be the big thing, and that's coherent with all of the makers we speak to. It's, I'm just here to do life my way.
Right.
Yep.
I'm here to do this how I want to do this.
Well, and people will tell you all the time, like, "Oh, that's unconventional. How are you gonna like? What's this?" Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So other than Born Free, that's obviously brought you a lot of business and a lot of stature in the space, working with those guys. How else do you get your wares out there? How do you get found?
Get what?
Get found. How do people find you to do their
They
stuff?
find me. You know, Instagram's been the best tool for so long now.
Yeah.
And if I have any real concern, it's that goes away at some point. You know, you see algorithms change. I don't understand how any of that works, you know.
We don't
There'll be
either.
points where literally 1,000 people will like something you post, and you post the exact same thing, and 51 people will like it. You're like, well, what's going on
Yeah,
here?
what's the reasons
You
behind
know,
it?
I don't know what it is. Or maybe they've switched something. I don't know. But that's the thing. And that's the thing that literally is like your portfolio nowadays. Your portfolio is on a real-time basis. And you know, I think there's a lot of people that put a persona out on the social media as something, like you can create whatever you want to create for yourself. I mean, if you're at all creative, if there's something you don't like, you can just delete that, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of people put a persona out, and then maybe you see them in person, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought. But I mean, I solely post work that I do. I solely post, sometimes grandbabies, whatever, but creative stuff I see along the way, which is cool. My eye's always going, I'm blind in one eye, and I have been since I was really, really young.
Right.
Okay.
And Teresa, my wife, will literally say, how are you driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour and somehow you're picking out a 59 Cadillac behind a fence with one eye and you're still, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just been this, like, I'm always looking because there's so much to see, People will say like, oh, that part of the road, it's the worst. Oh, that's terrible. The desert, I wish you guys could go through the desert.
Yeah, a few people have mentioned that. I think that's on the list
because
next
literally it's spiritual to me. You get out there and it's just, I'm looking at the mountains. I'm looking at the way the sun and the clouds change the lighting, and it's like being in a gallery.
Yeah.
And I literally say to people all the time, "Oh, that's the worst stretch of road." And I always say, "You're not looking hard enough."
Yeah.
And I don't think people look hard enough. And I think people have given up in America. They've given up on the city squares. Luckily Texas retains a lot of that. I'm sure you've seen some little city squares and whatnot. But I mean, it's all quicker, faster, junkier, mega stores out on the main highway that bypassed every little town.
Do you know, we've seen two really good examples of that. One was in Elkton, Kentucky, and one was Columbia, Tennessee, where it was still the original court building and then all the nice little shops surrounding it.
It was
And
so nice.
that was just lovely.
And you're seeing it out here now. So Austin has sort of imploded on itself. Austin is not Austin that it was in the 70s when all the artists went there, when all the musicians went there, when all of the, that's really where, like, these are fighting words with Nashville, but that's where country, well, no, country was from, the cool country was from Austin. Right. It always has been. But Bakersfield had a pretty heavy hand in it in California too. But as people from everywhere are moving into Austin, and it's becoming a .com kind of place, and they're moving out of California to Austin, and there's big, big land grabs going on out here, people are priced out. Very good friend that has been in Austin since 71. Their rent on their building, which they both say they should have bought in the 70s, but they never did. They just rented it. It like quadrupled overnight because their new landlord is from Dubai and he's never seen the property, but it went up 4 times. So they're out. So as that happens and it implodes from within, it's blowing all these creative people out.
Yeah.
And even back to the point of how did you go into business, and I just changed where I was living. I still have that same social media outlet, which is bringing people to me. So if I'm in Texas and I have to go to Nebraska, it doesn't matter if I'm coming from California or here. Same with Austin. I mean, if people blow out and they move to some little cool town that's been forgotten, and I think that the superstores on the highway and the bypasses and all of that, people say, oh man, that killed all these little towns. I feel like it preserved those little towns. It put them away for a couple of generations. And then the generations that come along that then, oh my gosh, what is this? Look at this. This is like, still looks like the 40s. It's a time machine.
Yeah.
They move back in because the rent is cheap or whatnot, and the artists can get into a really cool building, an old mercantile or something.
Yep.
And then they do this thing, and then it's like, it's like Marfa, Texas. I'm sure you've heard of Marfa.
No.
Maybe not. So it's a big artisty area out on the west southwestern part of Texas. That's happened because artists moved into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's how they do it. And then the people seek them out, you know? So if you have a cool storefront in the middle of absolutely nowhere, people will make it a destination.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And that's it, isn't it? It's about making places like this destinations, and that's kind of
Yes,
what's
okay.
cool. That we've seen a few places, you know, Derek and Lauren in Shreveport. They're trying their hardest to make Shreveport a destination again through their shop.
Right.
There's a bit of power and a bit of responsibility. I don't want to sound too much like Uncle Ben and Spider-Man, but there's a bit of power and a bit of responsibility that comes with that being a maker, because you can drag people from all over look at us. We've come from Scotland, and on
And we're
our
like,
trip
"Come-
we're like, we need to come and see this
Well,
guy.
that's the funny thing. My dad was like, I told my dad what was going on. He's like, well, how did these people find you? You know, because he's working off of a Yellow Pages in the phone book mindset.
Yeah.
Right? And those days are gone. You know, we were talking to some guys one day. My wife's now here.
Yep.
We were talking to some people one day. We were up at in the stockyards.
Yeah.
These guys walked in, and you can tell, or I can tell, I think we can tell, but you can tell they had money. They were in the regular, maybe outfit, but their outfit was on point, you know?
Yeah.
So we started talking to these guys, and we were having some cocktails, and, you know, had some friends in town, and turns out these guys were from huge money. And so they were quizzing me on what I did, and they were quizzing me on, where's your webpage? I'd love to look at your webpage. And I'm like, my webpage is lapsed. It's it's dead. It's somewhere back in, 2005 with the residuals of the blog I had. You know, I mean, it's not the standard anymore. And they were arguing with me that it is the standard. And I'm like, I don't think so. If you put Lucky Bee Design into Google, like, a page and a half comes up on my work.
Yeah.
So you can pick whatever deal it is, but it doesn't go to that website anymore. I mean, I really think it's changed the way things are done. You're not the big guy on Main Street anymore. You're a really talented guy in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what's important.
Yeah.
And I find that really important because it also raises the bar.
Sure.
When there's so many other people involved in it, it's that bar just gets higher and higher and so not only is it so big that it creates a place for everyone, but to be truly outstanding, you need to be chasing being above that bar.
Sure.
And when you're compared to everybody, that's interesting.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. You know, I've heard a lot of the guys, like we talked about earlier, that I want to be a sign painter. Mm-hmm. They'll literally tell people that, sign painting inherently needs to be flawed so that you know that it's hand done.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. The case, you want to make that, you strive to make that perfect letter.
Yep.
And that perfect letter is never going to be spot on 100% perfect. None of this stuff is perfect, but visually, it's perfect.
But that is the perfection in it, isn't it?
Yeah.
The perfection in it is that it's not
Sure.
the vinyl cut.
But,
quality control manager too.
yeah, she's really good at, she can come out. If I have a big piece I'm doing, she can come out and the only flaw on it, she'll spot immediately, which is not negative. I mean, I know it's there and it will piss me off. Like, how'd you find it? But she just knows. I mean, we've been together so long, she knows. She knows what drives me crazy, and then she just like, to a degree.
Yeah. So that bar being so high, what do you think that's like for new people trying to get into it? I feel like sign painting now, and I could easily be talking out of turn because I don't know sign writing, sign painting. Like, it feels like it'd be a harder thing to get into now because there's so much technology. It feels like you would gravitate towards that.
Well, I think you need to just shun all that technology if you want to be true to it. Like, that's a broken thing, though. So it's not it's not what most people would do. They would say, oh, well, let me go this way. You know, sure, there's kids that are like, I only do it the old way. I only do it the traditional way.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, so do I. You know, that's what we've known. But
Not to interrupt, but it's gone for full circle. In the beginning of your career,
right,
it was everything was hand lettered, everything, you know, hand gold leafing, whatnot. And then there was a big part where everything was vinyl. Even your
right,
gold was
we
gold
covered
vinyl.
all of that a
And then
minute
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
You come to this point, and thank God for hipster kids.
We talked about that earlier,
Yeah.
yeah.
They want the cool stuff again, and that's where it is. It's like now people are searching out what he does.
Do you know, it was the first time I heard that point of view where it was like, thank God for hipster kids, and I was like, man, it's right though. There's no
It's
arguing
totally
it.
right. I mean, the reality of the thing is, you know, it's funny. I've even had people sort of level that my direction, like, oh, you're kind of a hit, and I'm like, I've not changed since forever. I mean, it drives her crazy. She's like, can't you just change the way you do this? And I'm like, no. I mean, this is just. But I mean, it comes back, right?
Yeah.
Things come back. People will say, I'll have clients go, man, this, what do they say to me? It's like,
Are you talking like when they consider what you're doing, arts and crafts?
no, I'm talking about when they consider what I'm, like, I've curated this look or something. Like, oh, you've really put this thing together really well. And I'm like, it's so weird and foreign to me.
Mic you up as well, because there's no point you not being mic'd up.
Oh, shoot.
So yeah, sorry to quickly go back to it. That's the first time I'd heard that view of like the hipster really bringing it back, and I was like, we were talking earlier about, you know, I've never walked past a coffee shop that's got a hand painted sign in it, or a shop in general, and not stuck my head in to see what it's all about. And that seems to be probably where the rise stroke resurgence of this whole craft seems to be.
And I think it's just all part of the same thing that's driving the clients your way is people are tired of throwaway society. They're tired of a mundane existence. People crave to be creative. I know people that are trying to be artists incredibly hard, but they just can't pull it off. They're not artistic. So it's like they really want it that bad that they're trying something that they can't even do. And that's interesting to me. And I mean, there's a lot of the younger guys that have started to put out work over the last few years that like technically aren't ready to be on that level, but it is a big learn curve. I mean, there's one guy, Travis Hess. I'll say his name right now. He's back in Virginia or West Virginia. Hopefully I got one of those right. A buddy of ours, and there again through Born Free, that was he's a custom car painter.
Oh, cool.
Like sprays. But then he started lettering, and he literally picked up a lettering brush and ran with it. And really, everybody was just like, oh my gosh, this guy. But I think, you know, and he's one of the few.
Yeah.
Because literally it took me 2 years of continual practice to just get it.
Yeah.
And people say, hey, easy money. Like, oh, you're making, you know, and you'll hand them a brush. Like, hey, pull that letter.
Yeah.
And then, it's a bunch of cussing and screaming and, you know, this kind of thing. Because it is so much deeper than hand-eye coordination, you know. It's you're feeling that thing. When I'm striping and blind in one eye, I can't look around my hand.
Yeah.
I have to know where that brush under my hand is.
And you can only learn that through time doing it, can't you?
It's just the feel, you
Yeah.
know. And I don't want to make it all sound easy. I mean, I'll be screaming out here sometimes, you know, because
Yes, I have to sometimes tell them, just set your brush down and walk away.
Yeah.
Just, you know, go get something to drink, do something,
Yeah.
go back, because
Something
he'll be
else.
losing his mind, like, it's not pulling. And I'm like, just
There's-
walk away and then go back. And then he'll tell me later, like, oh, thanks. Like,
Well,
I
there's
walk
days
him off
where,
of a ledge where he's like,
yeah,
losing his mind.
that literally is, that's what you need too as an artist, because your mind is always striving, I think, for this perfection. And when it's not happening, and whatever it is that day, it could well be the brush, it could well be the how much
could
the
be
paint got let
colder,
down. It could be
hotter,
colder, it could be
more humid.
Texas is a weirdo too, and the fact that paint doesn't dry out here. And what I've learned for the first whole part of my career doesn't really pertain out here. So like, I've had to really, like, that air conditioning unit is also a dehumidifier that literally is dripping water out the back of this place, all the water that's in the air that won't let the paint dry.
Wow.
Which is a whole different weird thing that I'm learning. It's just applying things to a different area, you know. So I mean, that she does help me there, as far as not, you know,
Not losing the rag. Yeah.
banging my head into the wall, or whatnot. And there's been times, I mean, I do a lot of work for Firestone Walker Brewing Company, and they have me as a brand ambassador. That's like one of the old billboards up there that they had all over the place. And I was painting a big giant logo on the side of their wall outside, and it wasn't hooking up. Something was going on. The brush was wrong. And walls are weird anyway, because a smooth wall is harder than a really, really rough wall, right? Because you can stand way off that brush and let the brush dance down a really rough wall. But a smooth wall, that, you know, it's just kind of going everywhere. And you're really trying to work it out. And I was just under my breath cussing up a storm, I think, just frustrated with the situation to myself. What I didn't realize is just above me was the accounting for the whole company, and their window was cracked. So all the ladies in the accounting office were listening to me cuss for hours. And I heard that after the fact, and I was super embarrassed. Because there's a level of chivalry that I try and obtain, always. But it's one of those things, and I got caught on that, But I mean, you fight constantly your way through everything. It's always, people say, oh, what brush do you use here? I have no idea until I apply.
Right.
And how do you attack that? I have no idea. And, when I was young and what's that?
There's like a feel and a rhythm.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I was young and first in business, I would just say, yeah, I could do that. And I had no idea how to do it.
Do you think that was important for you earlier on?
Yeah.
To just say, yeah.
So I have a really good friend out in California that Cole Foster, who had a quote years ago that I've held on to that literally was like, and he's a car builder, amazing car builder guy. He said, the true mark of a craftsman is not what they produce, it's how they get through that oh crap situation that comes up, because it always does come up. And that's where you really have to double down and rebate that job and put it in a place where at the end nobody knows that anything came up. That's where the true craft comes in.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's not just blowing through something and making something. That is it. But there's that shot up your spine where you feel like the whole thing just went south. Yeah. That you have to power through, and that's, I think that's the biggest part of it. It really is.
It's one thing that I never really considered early on when we were talking to you is you're one of the few craftsmen where your not so much your media, but the canvas, let's call it, is always changing for what you do, isn't
true.
it?
It's very
It's
true.
always changing.
Right.
And do you only get around that time served? Surely the only way around that can just be experience, time served, and getting on the grind.
It's a controlled, naive approach to everything, because you really don't know once you get on that ladder how that's going to be handled. But I trust myself well enough to know that I'm going to work through it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I mean, the jobs that most worry you are the jobs that you blow through in a few hours, and you're like, holy cow. Like, how did that
What have
happen?
I missed?
And literally, like, that's where I think we're you know, your journeyman level sort of per se thing comes into play. I mean, you've been doing it long enough that you know how to get out of that situation. You know, how to control that situation is a better way to say it. Because there's walls that I painted that should not have ever been painted. You know, but they did it 100 years ago, so we can sure figure it out now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the cool thing. And that's part of like the next phase of what I'm going into now, which is real controlled, is old ghost signs.
Oh.
And that's what I pull off to look at in all these towns. And I go through back alleys and look at, and I find these 100-year-old signs that are just ghosted.
Yeah, we seen a bunch of them in Colombia, didn't we? It was like the old factory signage on the wall when it was a factory, and
Love
they
it.
are cool
And it
because it's just a little
really-
glimpse into what used to be there.
It really turns me on. It's just like so
It's really
cool.
fun to see. Like, you get one that's so faded out, and you take a picture of it, and then you're trying to
Work
adjust
out
the
what it was.
lighting on it so that you can try and figure it out, because you're like, I have no idea what this says, but sometimes you
Yeah.
can change that lighting enough on the photo
Oh,
and go,
okay.
oh,
And that
that's it.
that stuff I think is very important. I think it's super important. So I'm working with a client in Hereford, Texas right now, and it looks like it's coming through. There's a very famous Lee dungarees, like Lee jeans.
Yeah, yeah.
Sign from the 30s, and it's super famous. It's been photographed countless times, and I knew it through social media, or prior to that through the internet, or through, you know, blogs or whatever, that people had taken photos of it. And so years ago, I did this sort of pilgrimage, like 2 hours out of the way on a road trip, to go see this actual sign ghost. And it's pretty rough. Well, I get a call a few months back, and they're granting in America all these small towns like certain amounts of fundage to go in and do wall murals and all that sort of thing.
That's cool.
Okay.
So this little town of Hereford, Texas, which is a very farming-based, still agricultural town, they said, okay, we need to do murals downtown and start bringing people back down to the city center, away from all the big box stores that have killed all that. So one younger guy on the city council said, well, shouldn't we start with the historic stuff? And he said, there's only one guy. And so I got that call. So very roundabout, I got a call on this very famous piece to go back and bring life back to that piece.
Nice.
So that should be happening here in the next couple months once they get
All the paperwork and all the
all
stuff
that figured out. But I'm tasked now to bring it back, but bring it back halfway.
Ah, okay. So this was going to be my question. Are you bringing it back full to brand new? No?
The idea is to bring it back to a patinaed state, but bring it back to a legible state.
Oh, okay.
So essentially you're half restoring that back. And that's what's really funny about sign painting in general. When I apprenticed, I was taught to work opaque, and, you know, always look at the letter prior to the one you just did and go back and you know, fix any holidays or whatnot that come up, which, you know, any little spots on it. And, you know, that's the way we were taught. But in the last 15 years, I've been painting more patinaed stuff than I've been painting opaque. Meaning, I literally will paint truck doors or something that look like they've been on there for 50 years.
So this was one of the interesting things that when I'd seen your work, because there's painting truck doors, which looks great, but painting brand new stuff on old truck doors, it always feels like the artwork's sitting a couple of inches off the truck. And I'd seen some of your truck stuff, and that was when I said to Kate, I was like, this is the guy I want to talk to. Because there's a different level there, isn't there?
Well, I appreciate that, and that's what I've driven myself to get to that part where I put lettering on a 1950. People have asked me on my shop truck out there how I found a shop truck that had all my information on it. Now that sounds absurd, but it's also an incredible compliment.
Yep.
You know, it's a very naive thing to say, but their brain won't let them think that I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, did you buy that truck and then name your company after
Right.
it?
Yeah.
But that's, you cannot fake that process. It has to be created, reverse engineered, but from the front.
Yeah.
So guys fake it all the time. They'll have a stencil made and they'll blow it on with paint, and they go in and scuff up uniformly little spots. It's not correct. It doesn't look right. It doesn't have the brush strokes. It doesn't have the overlap of brush strokes. That's a thicker area. It doesn't have that pull through that's real thin and goes first. It doesn't have the area where the guy's arm hung out the window for 50 years and wore that part off. Now, I geek out on that stuff.
Yeah.
But I geek out on it because I understand the process. It cannot be faked, and it has to be faked from the front, reverse engineered, basically. And then the byproduct of that is people say stuff like that, which is great.
Yeah.
And I mean, you saying that is a huge compliment. I appreciate that because
Well, we appreciated seeing your work for sure.
that's what I literally strive to do. And so that's the next path in what I'm trying to do. I have a huge bid out for Hico, Texas right now, which is this beautiful little town an hour north of us, kind of northwest. I still can't get my bearings. I don't know where the ocean is out here.
But 101 is not dictating which
definitely.
way you're going.
So it's like this amazing town, and they have these sign ghosts downtown that are literally amazing. And before Hico started to turn around in any way, shape, or form, it was kind of a dead little town that boomed during the big cotton boom, and the boll weevil came and killed the cotton in the like 29, and the whole town went to nothing. And so it kind of died on the vine. But they had these amazing ghost signs downtown that people would photograph, and that was how Hico was portrayed forever. I have a bid to go and restore all maybe 10 of those downtown right
Nice.
That
now.
is
And
so
it's
cool.
looking really good. So I
All
mean,
to that partially patinaed state again.
that's where I want to go with this whole thing is restoring history almost back to history. Like, we're not going to lose it,
Yeah.
you know, but also you're not going to know it was restored,
Yeah.
which is the important thing. Or, you know, you could do a brand new piece downtown somewhere, and I did a huge piece downtown in Waco, you know, way up in the air. It was, I forget, 150 feet long or something, you know, that will be a ghost sign here in a few years, you know. So it's like, and it another restoration of what the sign was in the 1920s.
Yeah.
You know, I even signed the original artist's name on part of it, you know, to kind of,
Homage.
pay that, and then also to just to keep it alive.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, he did it way back when with some crazy, probably like guys letting him down on like a
Like a window cleaner.
window cleaner.
yeah.
Two guys on ropes, and he's like dangling there. You know, I'm
Swaying around.
up on a lift, the biggest lift you can get, and because you had to go around a building below, as far out as it will go. And I don't like heights, but I've gotten through that. And at one point I had to like unhook and get out of the basket and hook and hang off the side to reach with my hand on the end of the brush to reach the last little part.
Oh,
And I'm, you know, like, guys are like, hey, get down, the wind's 60 miles
what
an
he's
hour.
neglecting to tell you is how the wind was blowing at that time too. So
sketchy.
Loves what he does though.
Well, what's interesting about here, different than California, is there's elements at play here that I don't fully understand. You know, like the winds were blowing 60 miles an hour, and it was moving me around pretty good. But you just kind of got to get in the middle of that and try and pull a line,
Yeah.
which you can do. And there's crazy bugs everywhere here, so hopefully it's just a fly.
Yeah.
But guys will call it a day here for that. And in California, we would just kind of work through it. And that there was a lot to that. I mean, there's 50 guys behind you in California that are going to come get the job if you can't do it.
Ah,
You know what
okay.
I mean? And out here, there's a different approach, which I'm really starting to appreciate. But it also, I mean, isn't necessarily conducive to the deadlines or the bottom line. So sometimes you just have to power through.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What happened with the Lockhart sign? The
With the
one, the sign, because you posted it this morning. We've been following, you know,
yeah,
so
yeah,
we've
yeah.
been following
The
this
mural.
sign.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Kate showed me this morning that they've just voted to keep it. We were jazzed in the
yeah,
car coming over, having seen that.
Yeah, it's a real testament to social media and just like, you know, that sign initially, Texas Monthly, a big publication here, and it's
Yeah, I
like
subscribed to that when we started booking this, and we've been to half the barbecues.
the Bible of Texas, right?
Yeah.
They hired my buddy Matt Tomlinson, and then he said, "Hey man, I'd like to bring you in on this thing," and we worked together a couple times, and we worked together really well. So, in order for them to make this mural happen, and it was Coca-Cola, I think, and Texas Monthly that hired us. So they wanted it to look like an old-time kind of Coca-Cola style wall mural, which used to be everywhere. Every town has some sort of Coca-Cola something, or around here, Dr. Pepper, because it was born right here.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so in order for them to deal with all the permits and everything in a timely manner to hit the barbecue festival, they pulled a temporary permit with the thought, the very rational thought that if we do something amazing, they won't even look back at that. It'll just be like, it'll be forgiven and, you know, it'll do whatever. So we went, we did our deal. That mural, I mean, it's a perfect testament to what an art piece can do, especially for a town. I mean, Lockhart's on the map already, but that thing is posted like every single day, several times with, guess what? Lockhart, Texas under it.
Yep.
So what is that doing to everyone that sees it? You know, it's a great advertisement for this
Yeah.
little town. So then 3 months, which was the time for the temporary permit, comes up. And I think it was all I can figure now is it was kind of a pushback from the old guard in town about all the new people moving in, i.e. hipster kids, whatever. And they're like, oh, we're going to show them. And we're, you know, like, you know, you have these city council people that are from the old guard, and they're like, "Oh, your permit's up. We're taking the thing down." Personally, I think Matt took it a lot harder than me,
Right.
because I thought it would, you know, I would have loved to have video footage of them actually rolling over our work. That would have been priceless. You know? But I'm glad it's saved. And it's saved because we literally like got on social media and said, hey, this is what's going on, because they tried to run it through a city council completely quietly. We'll squeak it in on the Tuesday night, you know, roster kind of thing. And we blew the thing up, and people posted it, and people shared it, and people everything. And when they had their little city council meeting, it was standing room only out the door.
Yeah.
With people that wanted that mural saved. And the historical people literally like were taken by surprise. They tried to pass it to city council. City council said, hey, that's not, you know, we have to step through all this stuff to get it into our hands. And so it went around this whole thing. And I literally thought it was going to be then again jammed back through, you know, quietly. And it wasn't. They voted to keep it.
Good.
So yeah, it's I think it's so beneficial, and it's just trying to, like, there again, tell people from a different generation how beneficial something like that is now.
Yeah, and it's awesome that so many people got behind it to completely overturn
Yeah.
a council decision
100%.
on a wall sign, you know, a wall mural. That's fantastic. Yeah, we were jazzed to see it this morning, weren't we? That it had all been okay.
I had seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was reminding you.
So, what's next? Have you ever considered bringing an apprenticeship in? So, first off, you're absolutely fascinating and speaking to you. It's just there's clear that there's just a wealth of experience.
Yeah.
But I've got this underlying worry that I need to ask you about is what happens when you don't do it anymore?
Right. It's been brought up a lot of times, and it's been offered a bunch of times by people looking to apprentice. The quick, easy answer is I'm never in one place ever on one deal. I'm always out somewhere. And the guy that I apprenticed for made a machine. Like, I literally go in, I handle business, and I know the next steps. I know all that. So inherently, taking on an apprentice would slow you down. Mm-hmm. But I know that it's really important also to push this forward. So in my weird situation where I'm not here every day, and someone that say like wants to apprentice across town could come by, 3 times a week or something, it's very challenging. So that's where the sort of open door to everyone asking questions comes in. I'll always answer their questions. I'll always answer their questions honestly, because I'm not trying to hide anything. I'll try and help everyone that I can, but I don't know the answer as to how I would.
I think it has to be the right person to do it, because you have someone come in and they're learning all your little trade secrets, like how do you make that look wood grain or whatever. And they come in and they learn all your trade secrets. We have it in my business too. You teach them everything, and then they turn around and leave you and take all your business because they're doing it for less. And you're like, oh, okay.
It's a double-edged sword to a degree.
You also don't want the trade to die.
Yeah.
I mean, you want people to still know how to do these things, but I think you really have to find the right person that also maybe has the same passion you do and love for the craft, that is not just gonna.
They're in it for the craft, not for
Yeah.
And I think I've found a couple of the right people have asked. It's just, I don't necessarily, I had a guy that hopefully doesn't listen to this, but I mean, it could be anyone, that literally was pressing me a couple of weeks ago, like pressing me on when I could get down to do his thing. And I'm like, hey man, you're a few months out. And then, and people will do that. Like, oh, you're 3 months out. Okay, cool. And then like 2 months later or a month later, they're like, where am I at? And I'm like, you're still 2 months out. And they're like, I can't just drop and go, but there is a bit of like last week, for instance, I had a hole that presented itself because a couple of things changed, like supplies. I couldn't get the supplies. So I called one of my clients and I said, hey, I can get up there. And they were like, oh my God, yeah. So it's like, how do you do that? Always be on sort of a pivot and have somebody with you. That's the part I always, but I understand the importance of it. Yeah. I don't know that I just don't know how to understand and make it work.
What about immortalizing it digitally? Some sort of like following film crew with you, something like that.
There's been some of that.
Right.
This whole 805 beer campaign for Firestone Walker, I mean, they literally drove past my shop one day in California, and there was a big 4th of July, Independence Day parade and all that sort of thing. And we were just doing our thing, barbecuing, and had a bunch of friends over. And, it just turns out your friends all have neat old cars and whatever. And, they looked at the shop and were like, holy cow, what's going on at this place? And so that's why, any company, brand ambassador is like, oh, they do something cool. Let's use that to like lend something to us. And, it works well. So a lot of it has been sort of immortalized. I have a friend, Scott Slesher, who's a cowboy photographer and really, really good. And, he's definitely set apart from a lot of photographers in the way that he's horseback. He's in the middle of the branding. He might be holding a rope and snapping shots with it. You know, like he's in the middle of it all. And it works amazing. He has shot so much of my work that I always joke, like, you know, someday when I die, he'll have a book, you know, like ready. But like, it does get a lot of interest that way. I've had some really neat pieces done. I think there's always room for more. I'm going to Turkey, Texas at the end of this month to paint it's called the Church of Western Swing. And it was built as a church in the early 40s, and it went out of business in like 4 or 6 years, something like that. And then it became a honky tonk.
Right.
And it has been a honky tonk. Turkey, Texas is the town that Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys were from,
Right.
If you've heard of them.
I've heard of the Texas Playboys. Yeah.
And so Western Swing is really around this whole area, but it's like a subgenre of 40s country music, basically. And so I'm going to do this really cool old sort of tabernacle to country music. And it's a really, really, to me, it's a really moving kind of project, you know, and that's the
Nice.
stuff that I love. To get involved with these sign ghosts, to get involved with branding this historic building.
There's an extra layer to what you're doing when you're doing that, isn't there? There's not
Yeah.
just the sign painting and the sign writing, but there's just this extra layer
The
of
story behind
you're
it.
involved in the history there.
Yeah, and I'm chronicling this really important building in the middle of nowhere, and I'm leaving my mark on this thing, which is a big thrill for me and a privilege for me. And you know, I always say, and it sounds morbid, but every time I do a job, that's another piece that I've left behind when I'm gone at some point.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, in 100 years, that'll be that sign, ghost sign, you know, and people are like, oh man, hey, what's this Lucky Bee? You know,
Yeah.
if they can even read a brand, you know,
Yeah.
what's this Horseshoe Bee? And I don't know, it's just, you're sort of leaving your mark in the midst of a lot of history that you really, truly love anyhow. So that to me is really amazing. So I think Scott is maybe going to chronicle some of that.
That would be
This
cool.
sign ghost thing, restoring these ghost signs, I think that's a big opportunity.
That's a whole series in itself, yeah.
To get a crew in there and get somebody like chronicling that whole thing. You know, I've had people like talk in the past, like, you know, everyone does. It's funny to me that all the TV shows are about people working, right? Because like you want to get off work and go home and watch shows about people working. That doesn't make sense, but we all do it.
Do you not think it's about people doing interesting work though? Because I've got a theory about this as well, and you're right, all the TV shows are about people working.
Sure.
But do you not think it's for the people that are in cubicles that want to come home and
I
watch
do.
people work?
I think it's obviously got to be that. Like I said, I pine to wear a suit occasionally. you know. It's the same thing. They are like, oh my gosh, I wish I had some freedom and not this guy breathing down my neck all day and some quota or whatnot. And I think, you know, through the whole last couple years, I think that whole playing field has changed too, to a degree. There's people that realize, companies that realize like, oh shoot, we don't even need, I forget who it was, but there's a big company in Dallas, like a big company that is selling their facility because they realized people working at home has worked just as well.
It's
So why
happening
do
back
we
home
need
as
this
well.
giant corporate facility downtown?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's interesting because it's putting people, you know, but there's always some next thing, you know? I tripped into that little AI hole the other day, you know?
All right, yeah.
And I'm
yeah,
like, and people are like, oh man, this could have the potential to put all these people out of business. But then the cool thing is it can't put hand-created stuff out of business because it can never do that.
well,
It
you've
really
seen it
can't.
firsthand. You know, vinyl tried to put signwriting out of business. People ultimately came back to it. People might, I feel like all these new things, we all say, oh, they put people out of business, or it'll be this, it'll be that. But ultimately, they all end up just being a fad. Because we all long for stuff that
There's
just
a
lasts
pendulum
forever.
to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always coming back.
Yeah.
All these people moving back to Texas are the pendulum of the people that came out to California. Because no one's from California. We are. I mean, she was born in Alaska, but she's basically her
That's only
family's
because
from.
my dad was in the military.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
literally, I mean, it's like, it's always going to come back because the newest, craziest thing, this big hurdle set in front of everyone, whatever it is, the banks, the pandemic, if it's AI or whatever it is, literally, you're just gonna have to like put your nose down and power through all that stuff because that's, I mean, social isolation wasn't hard for me.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 30 years, 30 plus years.
My dad said the exact same. He works for a big corporate entity, and when the whole world shut down, he was like, well, all my guys already work from home. Nothing changed for us. We just maybe mentioned the word COVID on a call every so often.
Sure.
That was it. It was as simple as that.
And that's it. I mean, not a lot changed in our worlds, other than getting COVID.
Yeah.
Which not that we went out and were flagrant and got COVID. It just came around.
Everyone got it.
And I think that, we just powered through it. I mean, it's what you do. I mean, maybe it's a different mindset. Maybe people don't know. I have a good friend, Don Gonzalez, that I was actually on a podcast that he does.
Don Gonzalez, Lost Trades podcast.
Do you know him?
Yeah, I know him. I don't know
you
him
know who he
personally,
is?
but I listen to his podcast, yeah.
So he had an incredible thought on that whole deal, and it was if you didn't come through this pandemic without a new skill,
Yeah.
you blew it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what were you doing?
Yeah.
People.
He's someone I'd really like to speak to because I think he shares a lot of the same views as us.
Oh, he's great.
And once these trades are gone, they're gone, and we've all got time and the ability to learn new skills.
Well, we could run him a call too.
That'd be cool.
He's literally, I think, maybe 45 minutes or an hour out of Austin.
Oh, really?
He's just kind of to the southeast, down by Lockhart. Then you could go look at that mural.
There you go. Let's do it. There's another day.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's what we're doing on your birthday. That's the last day. I'd love to chat to him because I just think. So Ben Geisler, the saddle maker that we podcasted with a couple of weeks ago, we stayed with him for 4 days, and me and Ben have got a bit of a man crush going on. I love his stuff. I love who he is as a person, and I love the authenticity that he brings to the table. And he done Don Gonzalez's podcast as well, and I immediately to Don Gonzalez's podcast, I was like, before I'd even listened to it, just the theory behind it, I was like, this is exactly what we're about. Lost trades.
Sure.
The heart that goes into doing this kind of stuff.
Well, and the importance of chronicling it, like you guys are doing, like Dawn is doing it, there's a real importance to it. That to me is what I'm explaining when I say it gives me the chills that I pinch myself. I was called a few years back in my world of rodeo, like you went to. Was that your first rodeo?
Yeah. That was our first rodeo.
So
Something else.
we've grown up in or at the rodeo our whole life, right? And I'm losing the point I was going to make. I had a great point. Oh, shoot.
Old age.
It's old age. No, there was something I was just going to say about that.
We're talking about Don
a few years ago, I got called to restore. The NFR is the National Rodeo Finals that happens every year. It's in Vegas now every year. And we go to that. A lot of our clients, Boot Barn and Kimes Ranch and all these companies like
Best Hat Store.
We go and work and go to that thing. So as much as I sort of loathe Vegas, it's kind of a cool time to be there because the whole town becomes cowboy.
I wonder if that's the one Ben was talking about when I was texting him last night. Ben was saying there's a serious rodeo in Vegas. Is it tail end of the year? It's around December.
Yes, in December.
Yeah, because I was talking about flying out to
10
go to that
days,
event.
10 days of rodeo. It's something else.
Sounds fun.
And I'll get into that in just a minute. But I got called to go up to Dallas our friends were putting together this little rodeo deal in Dallas, where the Cotton Bowl and all that stuff is up there at the Dallas Fairplex, which is all built in the in the 30s. It's all Art Deco buildings. It's really phenomenal. The first professional rodeo finals was in Dallas in 1959, and the original bucking chutes were out in the back, like under some trees in the weeds, just totally destroyed. Well, a friend of ours, Evan Tate, he got in and got permission to pull out those rodeo chutes, and him and a crew like stripped them all the way down and restored them. And I got called to letter all the
Nice.
giant numbers on that. So as a little kid, all the way up, you have all these like idols, like all these guys that you look up to and whatnot. Those are the gates that like Casey Tibbs and all these famous cowboys tipped out of back in the day at the first one. And I'm painting those in the building where that was
That's
where that was
incredible,
held.
huh?
That's multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
In my own brain as I'm doing it.
That's crazy.
I'm literally blown away. And I had guys comment when I posted that stuff that were like, you do a lot of cool stuff. And I mean serious cowboy guys that are big time guys.
Yeah.
That said, you do all kind of work, but by far this is the greatest thing I've ever seen you do. And it's not because anything was intricate, and it's not because anything was pushing any boundaries or anything. It's because we were doing this amazing historical piece. So it's multi-dimensional.
And it was the original ones restored, wasn't it? It wasn't
Right.
a rebuild. It wasn't a remake. It's the original thing, bringing it back to
And
life.
they were just totally aborted in the back corner somewhere, just
Really?
Yeah.
rusting away.
Yeah.
And so then it's cool that they came back. And it's probably missed on 90% of everyone that goes through and sees it. But the 10% that really know,
They know.
it's huge.
Yeah.
You
That's
know.
awesome.
And it's just that kind of, I want to preserve. I want to get involved in some of these really amazing pieces that keep giving.
Yeah.
They're the heart. They're the soul. They're all that amazing. Whatever little part of the world you're in, there's some real clutch pieces.
So to go back to my previous question, you want to keep giving, you want to preserve. How do we preserve Lucky Bee?
Yeah.
That's Scott's job.
That's Scott's
Yes.
job.
Scott
Or
Flusher
somebody's
is on
job.
that job
Yeah.
Good.
for sure.
I don't know. It's. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I hope you find a way to do
I
it.
think.
I really do.
I think it keeps presenting itself. It's out there. I was on Don's podcast, and he very much shares our mindset 100%. He's very, very vested in keeping tradition alive. And that's always been one of my, since I started in business, is pride in tradition. And that's it. I mean, according to the new way of doing things, I do things totally compromised a lot of times, but I create something that no one else creates, or that few can create, which is neat. And it's great. Years later, I'll go back and look at something. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you almost can't believe you did it.
Do you ever go back when you're back in California? Do you ever go back and see some of your early work? And how do you feel about that?
Good. When I went on my own, I was already at the point where I needed to be to go on my own.
Right.
I don't go back and see anything and go, oh man, that's terrible. That was something very amateurish that I
That's
did
cool.
because I was already
Yeah.
beyond that.
That's good that you're at that point. That was cool.
Which I honestly can't think of. I mean, there's stuff I've done, obviously, where I'm like, oh boy, I don't really like that.
I think it would be
but
more the things he's forced to do.
That would have been
Okay.
Like
something that
someone
someone
going,
wanted me
I
to
need
do.
you to make me this. I need
Where someone
3
else is the
pigs
brief.
in
Yeah.
ballerina suits on my tire cover,
Right.
And then he's going, it's not what I do, but
Yeah.
They want it so
But I
bad, and
can
you
do
don't.
it. Yeah.
Well, and back
Wanna
again,
say no, and
the
then
early
you
days
do it.
were
Yeah.
totally art prostitution. You know, you got to pay the bills. Like, you want what? Okay, whatever. You know, and you didn't have nearly the freedom that you have now. It's funny to me now. I'll paint something small. I'll do a door to a business or something. It's just very basic. It says so and so, maybe a drop shadow, maybe a flourish. And then they always, like, almost everyone's like, you signed it, right? And I'm like, no, you know, like, and that used to sort of be when I learned, that was sort of faux pas. You know, oh, you don't sign this. So we're just doing
really?
it. Yeah. It was like, there's something I still fight with, where there's a differentiation between fine art and the art that I do. It's definitely an art. Evan Voles down in Austin, he's a neon guy down there, and we've had this talk. Like, he's like, we're not artists, but we are. And it's not that I'm starting to understand. I'm just letting that wall break down, because we are. I mean, there's art shows that I've been involved with, and other art shows that literally chronicle, you know, commercial signage. And you know, hopefully, a lot of my work is fairly simple, but it's very complex in its simplicity.
Yeah.
I think some of my favorite gifts from you are when you've done paintings for me. Whether it's the one you did for my birthday on the rusty metal, or just, you know, a little Valentine's painting or something. Like, I love his art when he gets to actually be artistic in painting things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have been in the house and seen, but he's done a couple of nice paintings for me, and
what
I
you
love it.
appreciate it is that it's unbriefed. It's wholly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special
Yeah,
pieces.
I think he doesn't always look at himself as such an artist, and I don't think he's truly aware of how good he is at a lot of things, or he'll doubt himself and second guess and be like, oh, there's no way I can do this, and I ride his butt a little, and then next thing you know, he's got it done, and it's like, really? You thought this
What
couldn't
was
be
all the
done?
drama about? Yeah.
I'm digging the screwdriver and going, I thought you couldn't do this.
Yeah.
Well, there's
thought it-
literally
yeah, and then he does it.
like this initial, like I say, for a lot of years I BS my way through things, you know, and went and learned them as I did them. And that's just, you know, we had a talk the other day about my friend Scott Slusher and a couple of, there's a group of guys mostly based in Texas, but they're throughout, like, Arizona and all those places, like, in between. And they're called the Cowboy Artists of America. And they literally paint, like, a lot of, you know, cowboy art. And they're very amazing guys, most of them. But a friend of mine, like, jumped from, Bruce Green is his name, jumped from painting to 3D sculpture, just like that, and did these amazing sculptures. And the artist talk between us is like, oh my gosh, that's insane. And he's like, well, I got thrown in the fire and I just had to do it.
Did it.
It's just, the mediums are so parallel that you just have to step back from it and encompass the three-dimensional element of it, which you're trying to do. You know, my artwork, you know, that Navajo taco sign up there, literally, like, it's not one-dimensional anymore.
Yeah.
Sign painting, you're not fine art painting per se. You're skipping a bunch of the steps in the middle, but you're trying to trick the eye into seeing something else, which is, done correctly, is a very, very effective thing, you know.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I think a lot of those nuances are easily conquered. And I think confidence in yourself, and that's where I second guess myself, and she reels me in, is, I am a perfectionist in what I do. I have forgiven a lot of things I used to not forgive. Now I'll send something away that I would have never sent away, but the client will never know.
Yeah.
And people will never see it. She'll see it.
Yeah. You mentioned that guy that was painting and then jumped to sculpture. Do you think making and being an artist is more of a mindset than it is an ability?
I think it's a survival tool that you learn as an artist.
Nice, like it.
I mean that's it. I don't know. I've had this talk with other people that are creative, and let me ask you: do you think that everybody is born with a talent?
Yes. I
It's
truly think everyone is born with a talent.
Now, do
I
some
think
people
it's-
not recognize their own talent, or do
I think
other
some people don't get a chance to find it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I agree
think
with
you're
that.
right.
I think, especially in today's world where, when we came up through school, it was all about who you're going to get a job with and who you're going to work with. That kind of seems to be the way the world has moved. And I genuinely think people have not had a chance to find it.
Well, at school you get forced into a certain area, like
Yeah.
that kid's not meant to fit in that mold.
Sure.
And there's also an ability of, there is an ability of, a part of it that is luck that you do find it, because there's so many different things, you couldn't possibly try everything. Like, I'm never going to try free diving or spear fishing.
Sure.
And I might be the best person in the world at free diving, I just never know, but growing up in Scotland, and it's not the kind of thing I'm going to try. Or, sign painting or sign writing, like that's something I may have had a chance, had I grown up now, maybe art classes are more aware of it because and not to blow smoke up our bums, but because of companies like ours that are highlighting the different crafts that are out there and highlighting people that have made a very good living for themselves out of doing that. So yeah, in summary, I think everyone has a talent. I think the hard thing is finding that talent.
Well, I think a lot of people maybe never find it, and then a lot of people are disgruntled about, because it's interesting that people are like, "You're so talented," and I always think, like, what do they do really well?
Yeah.
Like, can I teach someone to pull letters? Yeah, I've worked with a guy years ago that we had to make spot on patterns for, because he would work off that line. Mine are pretty scratched, and I'll straighten that line.
Right.
I know where the letters need to go. I know.
Yours is more of a suggestion.
Mine's a suggestion. But this guy that we worked with, he literally, if there was a wave in the line, he would paint that wave in the line. He powered through and he made his living doing it, but he didn't have the creative. He wasn't the guy that if like you threw a curve into the deal, he could just adjust. It didn't work for him. And so that probably wasn't like his talent, but he learned it. I used to do flash art for this tattoo guy, and I was like, or stitch art for this leather worker, and I was like, you guys need to figure this out. You can't always come to me and have me do a flourish or have me do this kind of design.
Right.
You need to figure this out, or a new line of business, because and not busting their chops, but it was like, this is pretty important.
Yeah.
Like, you don't always have someone to do that for you.
Yep.
So it's I wonder on that, because so many people are disgruntled about, oh, well, I could have done this or could have done that. Or it's like people go, oh, you have, ladies will say, you have amazing hair. Like, I would love to have your, and I'm like thinking in my brain, like, well, okay, so you didn't get hair, but you got two eyes. And it's like everyone's got something, right? So it's like, that's the kind of nonsense I think about when I'm working, right? Do people always have a talent? Do people, so I don't know.
But you know what I do like about that is when people are, so one, it's the affirmation of people's skill, because I do believe everyone needs to get a bit of positive affirmation every now and again. No matter how self-motivated you are, everyone needs it.
Yeah.
And I also like that's looking at the positives in people.
Right.
Because there's so many people, and the internet's terrible for it. They just bash it.
Yeah.
And you know what? If someone's gushing over you because of your hair or the way you can throw a letter or whatever, like, at least there's a positivity in there.
Sure.
You know?
Oh, for sure. But it's just, I think, I don't know why this chose me, because it chose me. But, it's like, honestly, it's a way, it was a way to make a living doing art, and...
Yeah, you were going to school to be art history major, like, you were not even thinking about sign painting, but you needed gas money.
Yeah.
And
that's how we started the podcast. This whole
That's where we started. But it's the case. I mean, it's like, it's interesting road. It did find me totally. But I mean, I think I answered the call, The guy that I apprenticed for, like I said, he had 4. And I think that's where the art sort of died in it. He had 4 fonts that were his go-tos. And he never veered out of that lane. And he was very content, and he would dummy it down to a point of he was starting to lose the dimension to a degree. It's just like, oh, blow this out, blow this out, blow this out, blow this out. And then vinyl came in, and his the rug was pulled out from under him, and literally he was like just plugging away at little mundane things he did, and he still does now. And it's interesting because the guy that originally got me the job, my friend Eric Malbray, he is a sign painter, and he and I are the same machine because we were taught by the same guy. So if we didn't have 2,000 miles between us, when we get on a job together, we think exactly the same. We could start at each end, meet in the middle, and we don't have to look back at either one's work.
That's cool.
It's spot on. Yeah. Because we know what we're doing, and we're taught by the same guy. But
they have to take multiple coffee breaks.
Yeah.
We have to drag our feet a little bit, right?
They are so fast together. If it should take 2 or 3 days to do the job, they're like taking coffee breaks and still getting it done in like a day, going, oh man. What do we do?
Try not undervalue yourself.
Well, that brings up another point. And even in line with the younger people coming up, I've had to pull people aside and say, listen, dude, like, I didn't get that job. Did you bid against me on that job? Oh, yeah. And I'm like, man, you need to, like, I don't know what you bid that job at, but we need to all get on page, because you're way undervaluing yourself and you're killing everyone else.
You're bringing the whole tide down.
So that, going back to Teresa's point, we are not paid for how long it takes us to do the job. Mm-hmm. We are paid for what we do.
Yep.
So if I've had jobs literally that are, $5,000 jobs that you handle in a couple days. And it's in my brain the whole time, like, man, I need to drag my feet a little bit. But then I remind myself I don't need to drag my feet. And the client, we had a client years ago we were at a grand opening, like a soft opening at a restaurant, like an Irish pub, and I had done all this work in it. And we had a pending rainstorm coming, so I was flying.
Yeah.
I was just blowing this thing out so it would set before the rain came. And so we're at this soft opening, and the guy, I never met the guy I had worked for, but he's at the table next to us talking to a couple of girls, and he's like, oh, that sign out back cost this much, and it only took the guy like 5 hours and blah, blah, blah. And Teresa's like, you hear that guy's talking about you, right? And I said, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Who cares? Like, and literally it went on and went on and went on. And the guy literally was just trying to talk these girls up, right? Uh-huh. But he was just kind of going over and over. And so on the way out, as we were leaving, we just, hey, how's it going? You know, caught their eye or whatnot. And then I stepped back and I said, by the way, you know you're not paying that sign painter by the hour, right? You're paying him for the finished product. And he goes, what? And I go, do you approve of that job? Oh, it's great. And I go, exactly. He didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
No.
You done it that quick, he never even got to meet you.
But it was like, he was the assistant to the winemaker, that, you know, that kind of thing. But literally, what people don't understand, if I get out on a job and I blow their wall out, or if I'm on their wall 2 days or whatnot, there were 3 or 4 or 5 days making patterns in the shop before I got out there.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
so it's not
they don't
like
see what's going on
The
behind.
background, yeah.
they don't see
You
the
know,
big
if
grand
that
scheme of
brush
things.
lined
Yeah.
up good, the surface of it, the paint, everything comes together. And like he'll call certain brushes like, oh yeah, that was a moneymaker today because everything just lined up great.
Yeah.
But they're not seeing the hours he's sitting at his computer, you know,
Doing all the
hand
bits.
making the font because they want something that isn't a pre-made font.
Yeah.
And you know, they want this little flourish on it, or they see some picture from, you know, the 1800s and they're like, oh, I like that. Well, he has to make it.
That's the beauty
Yeah.
of it. You can bridge that gap between when everything was hand illustrated
Yep.
to today.
Yep.
You can bridge that gap. If you say, hey, I want this building to look like it did in 1920, you know, and that's where you get into this mural downtown, 1920s, hand-drawn font, half of it drawn incorrectly. You know, the skinny stroke was on the wrong side of the N or something. And historical's involved. Now, historical's flawed from the get-go in any of these towns because it's either a voted in and mostly a volunteer job that older people take that don't necessarily have any sort of historical credentials.
Yeah.
So they're vested in their city and they want to see their city stay, but then they like horribly misrepresent what should be there in lieu of some nostalgia thing they feel, you know,
Right.
kind of thing. So like I had to match all those letters, and I brought up the point that these letters are incorrect. Should I fix these strokes? No. They have to be historically correct. Okay, so I painted it incorrectly to historically replicate what was there, which is, there's a coolness to that.
Yep.
Everyone drew their own letters. Everyone had their own style. Everyone, you know, you could go into the next town over and say, oh, you know, Bob Smith painted that because the way he does his ends or the way he does his, you know, whatever.
Yep.
And a lot of that personality was incorrect.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of interesting too. And there again, we had to find out of like 3 photos that were blurry. We had to replicate what was on that building because it was all gone.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're becoming as much of a like research historian as you are a sign writer.
You're
at
like
that point, aren't you?
a sign archaeologist. You know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like you're literally trying to dig this stuff up. And that's the thing that's a little scary too. These ghost signs and whatnot, you can see them from here to the truck.
Yeah.
You get on them, they're gone.
Yeah.
Ah, right, okay. Yeah.
They're
And
gone.
you can't paint from here to the truck.
No.
You know?
You can't sketch the lines in from here to the truck to know where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
Because when you get on them, all of a sudden the raw brick and the old paintwork, the hue just marries together.
Yeah.
Especially the bigger,
The bigger stuff.
yeah, when you're getting on that like 100+ foot sign, it's like, whoa.
There's some insane signs in the stockyard that no one knows are there,
Really?
but they're there. And what I mean by that is no one's paying attention,
Yeah.
you know?
It's true.
Yeah.
And when you get back from them or when you get elevated, when I get up on a ladder, I look up the hill at these giant, they're like owl cigar ads.
Oh, okay.
And they're like 20 stories tall on the side
No
of this
way.
old hotel. And you're literally like, oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. And then I'm sitting next to a building where there's another owl cigars on this building. So they're literally like half a block from each other, and they're
And they're both
massive.
like 20 stories high, and
And
someone's
I
had
would
to do that with a...
love to get in and sell to the city of Fort Worth, restoring these insane murals.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But I also am faced with this crazy challenge that you have to be, you know, a block and a half away, elevated to even see it. Because if I get on that limestone block, it's gone.
It's a hard sell, that, isn't it? It's a hard sell.
Well, it's a hard hurdle for me to get from, man, this would be great, to actually executing it.
Yeah.
You'd have to get up there and scale the whole thing out, and you'd have to then overlay a photograph on a machine
No.
to then scale it to the right dimension, and then you'd have to fake the rest
Yeah.
because you're not going to get those dimensions correct.
It's
tough.
wild. This conversation has been an absolute journey. And what we thought we were coming to speak to a sign painter, it's been so much more.
Well, I was worried because I'm like, man, my shop's just like a little garage out
Yours
in the
is
back.
a working shop.
Yeah, it's a
It's
working
great,
shop, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of messy. And then I see all your other shops that you've been to, and I'm like, oh, well, that's good to hear then.
Yeah.
No,
You
it's
know,
been great.
I'm sitting here and I'm hearing you talk about some signs you did and everything, and it made me think about when you first started, when we moved back to Paso Robles from the Bay Area in California. I'm remembering when he first started being on his own, he was still working for Tom, traveling back and forth because I was still doing hair in the Bay Area and come down here building clienteles. And he, our daughter was always such a part of our lives and always with us with everything we do. And, she's fourth grade and we're driving down the road and a new place went in and they had horrible signage. And our daughter's like, oh my God. And we're like panicked, like, oh, what? And she's all, turn around. And she noticed this signage. I mean, I don't know how old you are in fourth grade, but maybe like 10 or something. I don't know. And she's like, who would do that? Like she was so
really?
upset
Yeah.
that these people did this horrible signage. And
Yeah,
it was like
that's nuts.
super proud dad moment of like, that's my little girl.
Taught her well. Yeah.
She like
Well, yeah.
notices this, and most kids, they couldn't even tell you what their parents do, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
she
That's
just
brilliant.
knew everything.
Well,
we
like I
do.
said earlier, we were able to grow up with our daughter,
Yeah.
because we're both self-employed. Now, so all the heartache that comes with self-employment, that was the real pleasure.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
So.
We've took so much of your time and asked all the questions. Is there anything we've not covered that you want to cover?
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know. I'm usually real easy to talk when you're questioning me. No, I hope the future stays somewhere rooted in what it is now. I think the positive, look towards the crafts and the arts has. It's just been a real positive, and we're all making our living doing this. So it's great that people, even through the last few years and few, through financial issues with the rates going up and inflation and everything here in the States now, people are still spending money, and that's just really, really a blessing. And I mean, we can't, there's no shortcut around what a lot of us do. There just is not.
Yeah.
So,
And that's something that's really important as well, because everyone wants to, you're a prime example of that, everyone wants to go and be self-employed and do something for themselves and do something creative, but you just have to do the time alongside it. You can't just pick it up and be the best. And
Yeah.
if you are walking away from, a well-paid job, and I'm having this battle with myself at the moment, you're walking away from a good, well-paid job to then start something new, i.e. us continuing this full-time, and there will be a lull financially. There will be a lull financially. You need to just accept that. The
Yeah.
world seems to just want everything now. And there's certain things that you just have to do the time.
Well, and I think it's a belief in your process too. I mean, we've had those moments where it's like, like I said, digging the mortgage out of nowhere or whatnot.
Yeah.
I've sort of trained myself to, it's like, oh man, but it goes back to that craftsman thing. How do you get creative and solve this issue?
Yep.
And you're always learning.
Yeah.
I'm always changing my work because I want to keep it fresh, but I'm keeping it fresh within probably a subgenre of lettering. I mean, how many ways can you go with a cowboy style letter? You can go a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can do things that really set you apart. And there's probably a squirrel in the tree. That's what those dogs are barking.
That's all right. You probably won't even hear them in the background.
Good. So, yeah, it's interesting to me to keep trying to progress within, my little parameters, because that's always going to, when I get compliments from other sign writers, like, oh man, that's crazy. That illusion's crazy. It's cool. And we're not setting out. I don't think any of us are setting out to be known or to be famous in whatever we do. I mean, there is an element of like succeeding. Mm-hmm. I'm not that guy. I think that's an artist mindset. Like, oh, cool. We covered the mortgage. We covered the bills. We covered this. Let's float a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's my mindset. Corporate guys like, I got to make 700 times what, we need so that I could kill the world. Well, like, we have a good life. We have a killer family. We have all this good stuff. And that's what's equally as important as like really quality work going out the door to me. We got grandbabies that are, they're next level cool. I mean, maybe not to anyone else, but to me, they're great, and it's like all super important. And going forward, you want it to all kind of just still work right, and that's just where you kind of keep everything steered.
Nice. Well, I get to pass on to Kate for the closing question.
Just one more question.
Okay.
You want to know about Sasquatch? What do we think it is?
What do you think Sasquatch is?
Yeah. What advice would you give your younger self?
Depending on the day. My dad tried to set me up with a job that I was like, I can't do that. And I couldn't probably have done it. But you wonder all these years later, I'd be retired now, But would I have done anything that made a impact? Mm-hmm. Whether, I would have jumped into what I'm doing now sooner. The path took a while to steer it where I wanted it to go. You can't, as a fresh young person, really get people's complete approval to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. But I would have taken the leap a little harder than I did without the buffer, because when I stepped away from my apprenticeship job, I did kind of go back occasionally, kind of thing. And it turns out in the grand scheme of things, I didn't necessarily need to. I could have just believed in my craft. But I think times have changed too, which have made that work. I don't know. That's probably not a great answer.
No, but it's one that we've had a few times. It's I wish I started sooner.
I just don't know what I would have done different.
You're being honest because, they ask you the question and I'm thinking about it. And for me, thinking about it would be for you to trust yourself sooner and believe in yourself. And it took you longer to trust that you could do what you do as well as you do. And once you finally started doing it, you were happier. You weren't happy making
Yeah.
Blackhawk signs.
No,
Yeah.
You're happy creating your art. And
You know, the beauty of it is I did have to used to do real estate signs and whatnot, and that, you know, I don't even go anywhere near that sort of stuff. And I'm not just talking real estate, but I'm talking all of that that kind of stuff, you know. And I would have probably, if I would have known that at the time, I would go back and, you know, it's funny, you know, I try and tell younger kids stuff, and they're like, well, how would you know? You know, well, if you could go back and know what you know, you'd rule the world,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, it would have been that. It would probably be just to jump in faster and hard, you know, sooner kind of thing. So
No, that's
if
good
he
advice.
had any other job than what he does, I don't know how long he'd be on this earth, because he would just stress out. And if he had to
Yeah.
go to a regular 9 to 5, that is not him.
Yeah, stressing out about something you care about is passion.
Yeah, this is something that when he's driving to his job, he's like leaning forward. He's looking forward to going and
That's a
doing
nice way to
it.
put it.
And,
Leaning forward.
You know,
yeah.
he comes out into the shop and he can go in and have lunch or something, or when I'm off, he can spend time with me, and then he can come out here at 10 o'clock at night or 4 in the morning if he wants to when he can't sleep and do stuff.
that's yeah. This waking up in the middle of the night because you're creative is the worst.
Yeah,
Well, there you are.
that's good.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this.
So
Thank you
have I.
so
Thank you.
much
It's
for
been
welcoming
great.
us into your shop.
Really been great.
And
Good.
yeah, it was fascinating.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely fascinating. I really hope you find a way to pass all of this on, however it is that fits.
Yeah.
I really hope you find a way to do that, because I think that's really important.
I do too. I'm cognizant of that. I just, you know, it's always a scramble, and you're always thinking about how to do that when you're in the middle of going to something,
Yeah.
you know. But
Ah, well,
I'll figure it
there
out.
we are. We'll wrap it up with that. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
thanks again.
Really appreciate it.
No.